Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It is Friday night. Welcome back. It is Friday night. Cocktail night. I almost said gallery night, but I think that's going to be next Sunday. Trivia night. We have not had a trivia night in such a long time. I've got wool flecking my glasses. How often do you have that? Just from grinding up wool, cutting it up. I've got it all over my glasses. I can barely see you. The wool, the rug hooker's dilemma right here with the wool glasses. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I am really looking forward to what I hope is a really fun gallery night. Damn it, I said it again. Trivia night. Gallery night will be not next Friday, Sunday. Next Friday, just so you know, projecting way far forward, next Friday, three things are happening. The Sweetheart Dance at Jocelyn's school. So she's going with her papa. They are going to the Sweetheart Dance. Teddy is singing at a basketball game at Quinnipiac. So I'm taking him for that, and I will watch him sing at the basketball game in the choir. And it is also my birthday. Let's not celebrate that one. Let's just whiz by that one. So next Friday we will not have gallery night, but Sunday we will. So that means be sending me your stuff, all your treasures that you're working on. Gallery night will fall this month on March 2nd. March 2nd. So sorry about that. It is next weekend, but it's the Sunday night. So hopefully we will look forward to that. Same as anything. Welcome back, everybody. What's going on here? My volume is up. We're good so far. Melanie, great to see you. Happy Friday from wet and cold Washington. Dang it, I'm sorry. It is doing that, isn't it? It's getting all wet, mushy, slippery, slushy, super dirty. I can't keep the car clean. Very scared to drive it through the car wash, which would be very fun, but I'm scared all my bumper stickers are going to get ruined, and I love my bumper stickers. I don't want them to go. It's slushy and miserable here too. Judy, great to see you. Happy Friday in Pennsylvania. Judy says burgers and beer on this cold night. Oh, that sounds like perfect winter fare. It really does. Becky, be good to see you. Good evening, everyone. Chilly night in Indiana. Let me just change my glasses. I'm already struggling. Let's see. There we go. Chilly night in Indiana. Have your pistachio latte, and you are ready to hook. Oh, that sounds perfect, doesn't it? That is a great onset to the weekend. It doesn't get any better than that. Linda B. in New Jersey, good to see you. Happy cocktail night. Cheers, my dears. I've got a big container of water. So thirsty. I was out in the middle of the day today with my friend Shereé. I'm working on an amazing rug project with her. She did the painting of Midsummer Magic for the Midsummer Magic issue of Magpie, and we're working on another project I have to keep secret just for the moment, but it is a fantastic folky combination painting and rug hooking combo project that will turn into a gallery thing. So I'll tell you about that as soon as I can, but we were out talking about that at lunch, and I had a wonderful orange bourbon sour. I had two, actually. I had two. That was hours ago, but that definitely did me for the day. No more calories in that arena anyway. And a beautiful quiche with, oh God, I just love quiche more than anything, with salad. It was so nice to be out at the Griswold Inn in Essex, Connecticut, if you know that. It's one of the early coaching inns. So much charm. Just, it's so atmospheric and historic. Cheryl, great to see you. Cheers, my dears. No snow on the Cape. Happy Friday night. Welcome back. Mom, great to see you. You poured your martini and you have a grilled cheese. Oh, your grilled cheeses are the best. Did you put the stuff on it? I can't say it because we use a bad word for this particular condiment in our house because it produces like some rough body stuff, but it's so worth it because it is so hot and spicy and delicious. I don't even know what it's called for real. We've been calling it by a bad word for a really long time, but it is so good. Oh, I'm so glad you're over there. Not healthy. Well, grilled cheese, a little bit of carbs. What can you do? You need comfort food. So glad that you're there too for cocktail night. Gayla, great to see you. Hello and welcome back on Friday. Gail, good morning and welcome back to you too. Just catching up on your comments. Karen, great to see you. Good evening from sunny but cold Black Forest, Colorado. Great to see you. 3 more inches fell last night. Yep. It is wild weather out there. You always get such extremes. Oh, thank you, Gail. Thank you. I guess I'm turning 53. It's just so hard to imagine. It's so hard to imagine. I feel like I'm like 20 something. Not in terms of maturity, not even 20 something. But, just stamina wise, I just don't know where all that time went. I still feel like a kid, and I'm always surprised when I think about my age and how everybody around me, at least in a school setting with my kids, everybody's so much younger than me. It's incredible, like incredible. I am the oldest mom by such a long whatever. I mean, it's yeah. Oh well, it is what it is. I think they're happy with me. I think we're well matched, but still, it's whoa. Jessica, great to see you. Jessica, your squares for the Caswell carpet are absolutely amazing. And I heard that you are working on one of the rose patterns, so I thank you so much for that. I love everything you do, and I'm super excited. If anybody's looking for a rose pattern, I have quite a few left. I'm working on the rose book, which is called The Rose's Tale, and it is a collection of rose patterns. And if you remember back to not this past, was it this past March? It might have been this past March. I think it was this past March. I started a collection of roses in the month of March. It was 31 days of roses. And the whole sort of impetus for the project in my head was, I talk such smack sometimes about so many flower rugs, just an overwhelming amount of lovely in their own right, but lots of flower rugs from the mid 20th century. And sometimes I get a little done in, just a little bit. They're all special and beautiful, but so much of one motif. And I challenged myself I think it was this past March, to do a different rose pattern every day of the month. And I did. And I did some extras on top of that over the months in between. And it has become the backbone for the Rose's Tale, which is a book made up of, I'm not sure how many patterns we've got at this moment, but it's a lot of rose patterns. But most of them are not rose patterns as you would think, like a McGowan pattern that's roses and scrolls. A couple of them are traditional like that, but by far there are dozens more that are not traditional, and they are all based on actual roses. So it's been a lot of fun to work on. I'm doing quite a few myself, maybe 7, something like that. It's a lot. And I had to give up, like just recently, this past week in my mind, I had to give up the pipe dream that I was doing a bunch more. It's just never going to happen. So I do have some of my favorite ones that I have most recently relinquished because I just know I can't do them all. And deadline, I'm saying like late April, 1st of May kind of thing. So there is still some time. I want the book to come out over the summer. So if you're interested in doing a rose for the Rose's Tale, which is an all rose pattern book, please let me know. Just send me a message at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com and I'll tell you what I have. They're all beautiful ones that are left, and they are very, very, very different. The only thing that I ask with the rose book, because the book is about what each of these roses look like, the only thing that I ask, and I normally don't ask anything in terms of rules, is that the rose actually look like the rose itself. So if the rose is a yellow rose and it's the doodle-dee-doo rose, which does not exist at this moment as far as I know, and it's supposed to be yellow and it's made pink, I'd prefer personally if it was made yellow, true to its literal color, just because I'm treating the book almost like a biography of roses with the backstory of a lot of these breeds, or what do you would call them, breeds of roses, species of roses, varieties of roses. I don't know exactly what the right word is, but I will by the time I finish writing the book. So let me know if you're interested in that project. Oh no, you have one sick kid over there. Oh, Jessica, I'm so sorry. You have some spearmint. Oh, I love mint tea and chicken noodle soup. One sick kid. I am sorry. It's bound to happen. It is the season, isn't it? My word, everybody's sick over here. We're good this week, but it's the first week we've been good in a while. Joyce, great to see you. Thank you so much. Next Friday. Still 52. Not for long. Joy, great to see you. Welcome back. Diane, great to see you. Welcome back. You are having a snowstorm there. Oh, I'm so glad you're cozied up and that you are there. April, great to see you. Thank you so much in Illinois. Welcome back. Great to see you. Judy, thank you so much. Today's your first grandson's birthday. My birthday is next Friday. The 28th is me, so not quite yet. But it is the reason why I won't be on live next Friday, along with the concert and the Sweetheart Dance. Everything is happening on the 28th this month apparently. Um, Ruth, great to see you. Date night. I'm happy to be pulling loops on Deanna's spiced coffee rose. No, Black Thread Studio. Sage Garden is Ruth. Black Thread Studio. Black Thread Studio. On the spiced coffee rose. Oh God, Kelly. Of course, Kelly. I'm so sorry. Oh, the spiced coffee. I always get the spiced coffee confused with Michelle Holler is working on the hot chocolate rose. They are two completely different roses. I was confused for a second there. Two completely different compositions too. Can you make totally different rugs out of a hot beverage? Yes, easily. And they're both really wacky. I love the spiced coffee. It's a beautiful rose too. Lorraine, great to see you. Oh, I'm glad that you caught us too. Welcome back. Good to see you. It's fun when it's live, isn't it? Hi, Sandy, my girl. Dave, great to see you. Hello, still working on you're still working on your quilt. I bet it's taking ages. Cheeseburger and cider for dinner in the snow. These are such winter comments, aren't they? I love it. Kathy, great to see you. When your son was in grammar school, he asked me once why all his friends' mothers were younger. Oh, it's funny that a kid would notice that because neither Teddy nor Joss seem to notice that I'm like a good 20 years older than most of the other moms, at least a good 20 years. And because I had them both in my 40s. So it's weird. They don't seem to notice. What he does notice is that my hair's not that good. Like he often remarks on people and, oh, which teacher is that? Is that the one with the long dark hair? And, oh no, this one with the blonde hair that she pins it back. It's a really good hair. It's better hair than yours. Oh, thank you. Thank you. He says stuff like that a lot. He's so cute. He just doesn't think. That's the autism in him. He doesn't think. Well, you know what? Let's get going. I have a full program, I think, today. It's always hard to tell with trivia night how things are going to transpire. But just as a recap, because we haven't done trivia night for a while, with trivia night, the sort of framework of the show is I will show you slides and I will ask you trivia questions about the slide. And I'll kind of hesitate, knowing there's a delay that's live. I'll kind of hesitate and wait for your answers and see who gets the answers. And oftentimes there's multiple choice. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's trick questions. Sometimes there's trick questions. So we'll have to field those as we go along. And we'll catch up a little bit more at the end of the show. I'm just not sure how long and how far these slides will take us because there's quite a few. Some of them are rugs, right? So right up our alley. Some are quilts and others are folk art in general. So I kind of cast the net a little bit wider than usual. And I'm asking you questions about folk art and primitive art in general. So some trick questions here, but the whole idea is that hopefully we will all learn something new. It'd be a bummer if we all knew everything about all of the answers tonight. That really would be a bummer. Why am I so thirsty after eating quiche? Maybe lots of salt. Lots of salt. And I want to catch up with you at the end because at the end I have some photos that I took when I was away last weekend, my absence. It was the kids' winter break. Isn't that weird? It was like just Christmas. But they had a small winter break. It was like Friday and Monday were off. Big whoop, right? It's like 2 extra days off, winter break. But we were away. So at the end, I'll show you some of those slides because we had a really nice time in New Hampshire. And I found some nice rugs and some interesting things at some antique stores. I'm always looking. So I'll share those at the end, but let's get started with our trivia night. Now remember, it doesn't matter if you know the answers. If you pipe up and you say that you answer the silliest thing and you're wrong, and then you're wrong again for the next question, and then you're wrong again for the next question, who cares? It's Friday night and we're having fun, right? Who cares? It doesn't matter if you're wrong. I'm trying to kind of sneak up on you and ask you questions that you won't know the answers to. So I don't expect you to know. There was no studying for this test, right? So make sure that you jump in and answer the questions and have fun. Get involved if you feel like it. If you're sitting back in your chair with your hook, there's no reason to lean forward and hit the computer and add content or a voice, right? You do whatever you're comfortable doing. And if I'm not getting answers for trivia questions, I will just tell you the answer and we'll keep going. But don't worry about being correct, right? Don't worry about that at all. Now, here is your first slide. And I got this slide from an auction house called Garth Auction House. It's an online auction. I don't know Garth Auction House, but man, this is a beautiful rug that they had at some point. I couldn't tell. It was not a current auction. It's a past auction, so this is not currently available. I couldn't really see when this happened. It could have been 15 years ago for all I know. But this is a rug that appeared on the online auction site of the Garth Auction website. And this is obviously a cat rug, and the cat is surrounded by a wreath. Now, when I'm putting together a show like this, I'm looking at rugs and artifacts and thinking, what kind of a question could I ask that has to do with this specific item? So with this item, when I thought, oh, this is very unusual, isn't it? It's an exceptionally good, I would say late 19th century rug, maybe early 20th century, featuring a very small cat in the center that looks like the inspiration might have been like a piece of Staffordshire pottery or ceramic, or maybe a print, something from a magazine, a little picture of a cat, right? Very, very literal. It looks like somebody copied it or drew it with the straight grass right across, right in the center. And, you know, it's certainly not a commercial pattern. It's like, you know, a hem and egger, right? It's a seat of the pantser. But it is lovely and it came out great. And it looks to me like the person who designed this and created it had some beautiful colors to work with. Loved the idea of putting a cat in. Loved the idea of doing a dark sort of hit or miss background. And then had the brilliant idea of further doing this light kind of tweedy border in all of these staticky shades of like light white, rust, oatmeal. It looks like static. It's very interesting. There's a lot of energy in this rug. Let's focus on the central motif because the cat is adorable just as he is. His eyes are like, oh my gosh, what happened? It's an adorable little cat with his little stripies. He's just precious, little tail tucked up. It definitely looks to me like a statue or something, doesn't it? Because the person really took trouble to keep that little sort of platform on it as if it's something that's standing on something, and not just a picture in a book or whatever. It's very, very sweet. The cat is in the center, but for me, the showstopper with this particular pattern is this incredible wreath that surrounds the cat. Now, the wreath is amazing. Part, I think, of the impact of the wreath, whoever did this, I think, was limited in terms of the supplies they had. They had a lot of bright colors. I think this was like the end of the fireworks show when they explode everything all at once and it's like the world is going to end. This rug feels like that to me because it's like they had a lot of colors, but not a ton of any one. And they used them all, right? Like all at once. And obviously they wanted and understood that the cat would have the highest impact if there was solid black behind it. And it does have a very high impact. It's very easy to miss the fact that while the background in general is a sort of stripy, dark black and brown. Now, maybe that brown has faded over the years. We don't know without seeing the back. I don't have an image of the reverse of this. But certainly there was a solid black and it was used first behind the cat, just to be sure it didn't run out, because it does have a lot of impact with the cat really in high contrast against that very, very inky, solid black, right? Very successful. The wreath is out of this world great, and it's not like the kind of wreaths that we see appear in rug designs of the 20th century. It is not that kind of a wreath. This is way more of a naturalist Victorian style wreath, which brings me to late 19th century, early 20th century. This wreath, maybe for you too, reminds me of Victorian wreaths that people would make, like hair wreaths, feather wreaths, right? Can you picture those Victorian wreaths that would be in shadow boxes that women would make as a handcraft? This one reminds me of, I'm going to ask you the question first, and I'm going to come back to the cat. This one reminds me of, for example, this wreath. This is a feather wreath. I'm going to ask you the question first, and I'm going to go back to commentary. This is an example of a Victorian feather wreath. The question for you with this first cat image is, when do you think people, women, started to create as a craft, for fun, as a hobby, feather wreaths. Would you say the 1700s, which is A, the 1700s, B, the 1860s, or C, the 1920s? So let's come back to the cat, and then we're going to come back to the wreath. You can answer A, B, and C if you feel like it. Karen says, wondering if two people worked on this. The stripy background looks very different than the detail on the wreath. It does. It does. And, you know, for me, it not necessarily. I get what you're saying. The wreath is very fine, and the background behind the wreath is much more naive. But I think the background is basically a fill, and I think there has been a lot of color loss. I have a feeling that it is, so far, both of those answers are wrong. So by process of elimination, the next guess is going to be the right one. Both great guesses, by the way. Thanks for guessing. I appreciate the interaction. You know, with backgrounds like this, I think hit or miss, particularly when the colors fail, never looks, the answer is B, 1860s. The backgrounds never do look stellar. But it is hard to compare a background that's meant to be just a speed fill with the flowers that are really meant to be articulated and fine and colored differently and more thoughtfully, you know. So I just love this piece. The flowers, to Karen's point, the flowers are extraordinary. It is so beautifully done, and it is great mentally to make a distinction, particularly if you are a shopper coming up to that shopping season of flea markets and yard sales. If you're an antique shopper, antique malls, we do see these kinds of rugs. How can I spot, or when would I suspect that a rug is an earlier rug? When the flowers look more like a wreath and less like a magown. When we see them as a magown, they are very symmetrical, formulaic, pretty well balanced. This definitely looks like a wreath, not like a flower, like an arrangement of flowers in the center, right? It's a completely different idea. So for me, this looks like a feather wreath. It could also be like a hair wreath or a flower wreath. The flowers are absolutely stunning. It's an exceptional piece of folk art. The colors have survived so beautifully. And I really love the outer border too. The fact they all look like scrubby kind of, you know, some kind of a dark garment, like a russety red garment, a little bit of black left over, just a little bit. A lot of the white or camel color, it's probably not white, it's like a camel. So colors that we would see often in clothing of this period, you know, colors that did not get dirty fast and get ruined fast. Those fancy colors are saved for the center, and it's impossible to know whether there's any dyeing happening here, but certainly small amounts needed to complete the center. It's an exceptional piece. It's also very hard to know whether the piece has ever been touched up or restored because, man, those colors are vibrant, aren't they? It really is an exceptional piece. Kathy says, I think he or she ran out of the black. The furthest right brown band has a very little black. Yes, you're right. It really does, doesn't it? If there was some kind of a ratio going on of like 2 blacks to 1 brown or something like that, on the far right, the black is completely gone. It could be that they ran out, or it could be that whatever they used to cut up the black just on the right, by the time they got to the right, they were using a different piece of material from a different source. It could be that by then they were using a black that was not color fast and that did dye over time. Also possible. So hard to know. But let's move to the conversation of what are these Victorian wreaths? This is a very popular handcraft, women making wreaths, right? This would be something typically that women would do at home, women of a class, upper middle class, not necessarily upper class, right? But like the middle and middle upper, you know, who it wouldn't be below them to work on a craft project while their husbands were out at work, and it was a new thing to be out at work. So working on something that would beautify the house, that has a naturalistic feel to it, a gardeny feel, doing things that look like arrangements of wreaths were extremely decorative. And other examples of wreaths sometimes were the hair wreaths. That I know it sounds terribly grotesque. This is another feather wreath, by the way. This one was a feather wreath, and this is a feather wreath. wreath. And when I say feather, I mean they are made of feathers. So the ladies would gather feathers, collect feathers, buy feathers, arrange them in a formation, in this case, like a wreath, right, with a center as well, just like the cat composition, but other way around, in a circle, an oval, a round, whatever, and put them into these really elegant and expensive shadow boxes. The feathers were often hand cut. So just like with Waldoboro and rug hooking, you could cut the feathers to be very, very sort of, if you look at the flowers like at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock, they're really like ostrichy and fluffy and fly away. They could cut feathers to get different effects depending on, what their supply was. Ryan, great to see you. Happy Friday. That's okay. Pizza, hard cider tonight. Peace and love to you too. Happy Friday night. Yeah, hand cut feathers. I mean, what a lot of fun. If you're into it, right? If you're in the mood for it. And, people still do these kinds of crafts nowadays, or, in like, for example, the 1980s when these kinds of crafts had a renaissance, a little bit less now. But we would make stuff that's similar to this, but be wrapping the stems or whatever, there is a stem facet to it, right? Because they're making something that looks like artificial flowers, but they're feathers here. In like the 80s, in the later 20th century, we would wrap everything with the floral tape. But in the Victorian period, they're wrapping everything with silk ribbon. So when you're finding these kinds of things in antique stores or out and about, one of the dead giveaways, if you really can't tell with the frame, like this is a frame that's a little bit hard to tell. Just look at the way that the thing is bound, whether we're talking about stems or hair or feathers or artificial flowers. Look at the way it's being held together. If it's being held together with floral tape, it is not old. If it looks like it's being held together with ribbons, it's entirely likely that it is very old. And oh, Sharon, great to see you. Happy Friday. And these are very collectible. The feather wreaths will be more collectible. Hair wreaths will be weirdly the most collectible because there is still a big market for Victoriana that is based on mourning. Like, just the whole mourning movement during the Victorian period was such a big deal because of Victoria and Albert. And because of that, there is a huge collector's market for all things mourning. And I know that sounds macabre, but it is very beautiful to remember people by these mourning traditions that were so dear to everybody back in the day. So things that have hair are still very collectible, whether it's jewelry and it's in your locket all braided, or it's a wreath made of somebody's hair all woven and looking like flowers. Those are the most expensive, but between flowers and feathers, feather wreaths are more rare, so they would be more expensive. You probably would find 20 or 30, I'm just making this number up, but I see a lot of flower wreaths, and I never see any feather wreaths. So interesting, isn't it? Something to think about while you're out on your travels. So good job with that one. The answer is 1860s. That is like, a little bit early mid-Victorian period, right? We're still early on in the Victorian period, and all of these decorative arts are so popular. And, people like to keep their hands busy at this time too. That old adage about busy hands, and idle hands being the devil's playground. Busy hands, what is it? Something hands, something to God. Hands to work, hearts to God, something like that. Being busy was religiously sacred and righteous and good, whereas being idle, obviously, you were a dirtbag, not so good. So we see lots of handcrafts coming from this period in history. This is a hard one. This is going to be a hard one, so I'm going to warn you, but this is hopefully one where we're going to learn something. Let me just take a quick sip. Can't believe how thirsty I am. Okay, we are looking at folk art sculpture. And this is African American folk art sculpture. And this originates in Baltimore. Now, I'm going to ask you through multiple choice if any of these names ring a bell. I'm gonna do commentary, but I'm going to ask you, do you happen to recognize the artist of this very iconic and recognizable folk art? Teddy, I'm doing a show. Come down if you want to see me. He's calling me on the phone. folk artist for this, before we get into the content, do you happen to know whether this is Lucy Robinson, Zoe Charlton, or Janet Henry? Now, I will tell you the years of life for this artist. This might help because two of these artists are more contemporary. The life years span between 1921 and 2012. Now, this is an African American folk art sculpture, several different kinds of pieces, right? Unusual, very dramatic work. Not a date specifically on these pieces. We just know that the artist passed away in 2012. This is probably 80s, 90s era. This is a self-taught artist who basically invented a form of sculptural art in which crepe paper, like Denison paper, was twisted tightly into cordage, another word like crepe paper yarn, and applied to the surface of things. For example, bottles, other cardboard shapes, tree branches, and found objects. The names are Lucy Robinson, Zoe Charlton, and Janet Henry. These are all important African American folk artists of the 20th century. But this artist, and it's probably going to be a guess because this is not a very well-known artist, but I think it's interesting and important to learn some new games, particularly because we work as folk artists too. And just the very idea that one would be sitting with a bunch of empty mason jars, like we're seeing in this picture, bottles of beer, molasses, maple syrup, whatever, and have the idea with paper that's sitting around that you could twist it and manipulate it to turn it into essentially fiber. Not Zoe, but these are all guesses because this is hard. It is A, Lucy Robinson, and that's a name that's worth looking up. There's not a ton on Lucy Robinson out there, and it is a shame. It's a shameful shame because this is a technique that she created, and she basically became a thrift artist, right? Working in thrift, using paper in a way that nobody had before, and applying it to the surface of what would be otherwise garbage, things that you would throw out, or maybe use for canning or whatever, put buttons in or marbles in or whatever. But I mean, how many bottles can one family keep over the course of their life, right? Sooner or later, it's going to end up in a landfill of some sort. But having the clever idea of covering the surface in a way that nobody had before. One of the ways of recognizing Lucy Robinson's work is that she's very religious. So we see the Lord is my shepherd in this. The bottles, there isn't any text or anything figural that kind of gives us a clue. But her work looks like this. And my God, if you ever see it while you are out doing your travels, pick it up. Pick it up for sure. And if it's and look at the surface of it, right? You can always take out your phone later and look at some of her work close up because it almost looks like, remember those kind of wicker trivets that were like super, super, super fine little lines of colored wicker that were popular in the 60s and 70s? It almost looks like that with the colored paper. And she could color the paper too, right? You could color the paper, dye the paper, paint the paper. Yeah, it's extraordinary work. And it's an interesting thing. You know, just when you think these are lovely, my mom says these are lovely patterns, lend themselves to hooking and punching. Absolutely. Even though she's working in a completely different medium, she's working with paper and she's laying stuff down as a collage artist, it is not dissimilar to rows of hooking, is it? If you think about translating it, doing this with punch, you could make something that looked quite similar. And just the addition of all of the shapes and the outlining, just very sort of celebratory, electric colors, very, very passionate and heartfelt, thrifty work. Super, super unusual. You know, I was just saying today, sorry, I got hot all of a sudden. I was just saying today, I was out with my friend Shereé, and we were kind of lamenting and saying, we stopped in Chester, Connecticut, because she's been painting like some glassware for a store that's in Chester. It's called Atmosphere. And she was saying, oh, I wish that I could, I don't really, she doesn't make that much money like selling stuff in stores. And it's such a hassle driving around trying to pick up checks and everything. And I said, let's work on some more projects together and just like ratchet it up a little bit. And she said, it's just, we're living at a time where it's very hard to come up with anything new. And then we talked about this over the course of 2 orange bourbon sours. And, she was absolutely right. She's like, when you think about it, every time someone comes up with something new, it's something to do with computers. Like, it's like at this point in time, it feels like everything's been done, right? It's all been done. And nothing new under the sun, right? They said that in the Bible. It's still true today. Nothing new under the sun. Unless you're talking about some kind of microchip or something you implant in someone's head, right? And then you need like a really heavy, intense working knowledge of computers, right? To be able to even articulate what you mean to do with your great idea. But when I see something like Lucy Robinson's work, it makes me second guess that sentiment, because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's now 2025, right? She might have made that 50, 70 years ago. And I haven't thought to do anything like that. So it gives me hope. Maybe there is some new stuff under the sun. Maybe there are things yet that we haven't figured out how to incorporate or how to put our own kind of twist or angle on something new. It is possible that there are new things. And the thing is, you won't know it until you see it. Until you see something new again, you won't know it. You'll just go, oh, dang it, I haven't seen that before. I wish I would have thought of that. I should have had a V8, right? So here comes your next question. Let me be careful here because I don't want to tell you the answer. You are looking at a piece of folk art that is circa 1930. It is a water wheel, right? A water wheel. Somebody cranking a water wheel. It is painted. I'm going to talk about this more, but do you think that this item is a garden ornament, a toy, or a whirligig? Sorry, more water. I took some pictures of this from different angles. I know that you've seen these before. I've seen these before too. This is big business at auction, in antique stores. These are most often handmade. They're either handmade or they're bought from somebody else, but I mean, they're handmade. They're not manufactured. These are exceptional. This category of collecting is exceptional in terms of folk art. Super desirable because I'm not going to give it away yet. You tell me what you think. Gail says toy. You tell me what you think your answer is. So in this case, as you can see, the character is going to turn the thing, the wheel, right? And things are going to move. This is what happens with all of this category of item. So I'm going to do a spoiler alert now and say it can be all three. Whirligigs are garden ornaments. And with the addition of some kind of a propeller on this, which could easily be fitted onto this or maybe is missing from the chimney, this can be a whirligig and be outside in, good job, Kelly, can be outside in the yard to catch the wind. If it's being used as a toy, so yeah, this one looks like a toy at this moment, but it might still be a whirligig. It might just be that it's missing its kinetic device, which is to catch the wind. So basically, these items work like pinwheels, right? They typically have something that catches the wind, like a propeller kind of thing, and they are kinetic toys. If they catch the wind, the motion that is built in, that is intended, happens, and the thing moves in whatever the intended way is. This is an example of another whirligig, maybe garden ornament. This one looks less like a toy to me because it definitely is ready to catch the wind. What an amazing piece of folk art. But you could see how this could catch the wind and work like a weather vane. A weather vane is a form of a whirligig, right? It's meant to catch the wind. For something to be a weather vane as opposed to a whirligig, it needs to absolutely have the right measurements of like sort of something that will catch a tail, right, that'll catch the wind, and it needs to have some kind of propeller so that the wind can be harnessed and directed. And then you look up at it and you go, oh, the wind is coming from the west. So the only difference between a whirligig and a weather vane is often the dimensions and the durability, right? You're not putting this on the roof. This is probably like 4 or 5 inches tall. You're not putting this on the roof. So this could be a toy. It could be something for kids to play with. It could be something to bring outside and play with. It could be just something to sit in the garden, and it could be a whirligig, right? Because they are fairly interchangeable, right? With the exception of the weather vane, and that wasn't one of our choices. They are fairly interchangeable. It's an interesting area of collecting because if you start collecting, this is folk art as it's at its best, and these are extremely competitive to collect. This is like a little red coat soldier, right? So this would be homemade and super collectible. This could go under toy or whirligig or garden ornament. This probably could catch the wind if you held it up the right way, just like a pinwheel, right? A pinwheel is a toy, but if you're just holding it in the living room, it's not going to do its thing, is it? As soon as you take it outside, it still might not do its thing. You've got to hold it up to the wind the right way for it to catch and start doing its gimmick. Same thing with whirligigs, toy, and all of this kind of category of toy. If you're not holding it the right way, it isn't going to catch the wind. If its only job is to catch the wind, then it has like some kind of a device that will direct the wind, and then we're teetering on the weather vane again. So really interesting, beautiful pieces, interesting to look at, very easy to find. It just becomes a question of how much do you want to spend on this stuff? These were things that I found on Pinterest, but I'll tell you, when I come across stuff like this in antique stores, I mean, sometimes you see stuff for a couple $100, sometimes you see stuff for $20,000, like in an antique store. These kinds of items, because they are super collectible and one of a kind. Condition matters, right? And I think subject matters. There are sub-collectors for whirligigs and these kinds of toys. Because there's so many of them. People will say, well, I only want to collect the chickens or the birds, right? I only want to collect the ones with horses or the ones with a guy, right? That does something like the first one with the water wheel. I just want to collect ones that look like the guy. And maybe they also have a collection of the mechanical banks that look quite similar as well and also have the same kind of mechanical device, but whirligigs do not have a mechanical device. They have a kinetic device, which means they will move, but the way they move is dependent on wind and not mechanics, right? Not winding up, not pushing buttons, right? Not moving it yourself. They depend on wind. So that is the difference between these, and they are such interesting pieces of folk art and great subjects for rug cooking. Can't you just see this? I mean, maybe you'd want to adapt it a little bit, the arms, because it does look like a whirligig right now. But if you adapted this with different arms, that would be a great little figure to use in a piece. It is so folky and so much fun. Now let me ask you this as we move on to our next question. Isn't this a beautiful embroidery? You take a drink of water while you think for a second. I know that's not a question. Isn't this a beautiful embroidery? It's not an embroidery. What do you think this piece is made out of? I don't have choices for you. I want to hear some crazy guesses. I don't want to tell you until I see some guesses. Maybe you know, because maybe you've seen this. This is a folk art medium that is extremely rare, extremely rare. Popular, again, during the Victorian period. Yes. Kelly, did you know that? Or did you look at it really close up? It is rice. Beans. Judy, I thought beans too. It is rice. Very rare, very hard to find these, particularly in this kind of condition. Now let me show you a little bit closer up. Like, seriously? Seriously? So I want to tell you, I found this website while I was researching the show for tonight, and it's a blog, and it is called Dull Tool Dim Bulb. Dull Tool Dim Bulb blog. Absolutely amazing. It is about folk art curiosities. Oh, Kelly, your sister made one in middle school. Oh, you're kidding. I know it, right? I mean, how cuckoo is this piece? Like, it is cuckoo for Cocoa. It's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So I found this on Dull Tool Dim Bulb, and I highly recommend that site. You will go down the rabbit hole with a vengeance. You might not be up by Monday when we're back on. It is endless and eternal, and it's so smart. It's such a smart site, so much good research, and it is all about folk art curiosities. This is a folk art masterpiece. This is 4 feet long, and it is made entirely of hand-dyed rice kernels, each single grain of rice placed by hand. Now, this is incredible, isn't it? Because at first glance, you almost think it's a hooked rug. It is obviously large scale, all whole grain rice, all dyed. I mean, tweezers are us, absolutely. I mean, if you are a person who is easily triggered, right? Can't you just see? Imagine yourself sitting at the table with all of your kernels of rice separated by color, and then someone knocks into the table, right? How would you react? I mean, I wouldn't react well. I have to admit, I would not react well. No matter who it was, it wouldn't be good for anybody. This is a project and a half. This is a basically now extinct. Well, Kelly, you're making me have second thoughts. I had never heard of this craft, but it used to be a child's craft, solely a child's craft. And I guess it was recently. We never did this when I was growing up. We did stuff with beans, and I did stuff with my kids with beans that I spray painted. So very similar, but obviously completely different scale. So it is 4 foot by 5 foot. It's framed like it's a serious work of art. And honest to God, I mean, it is, right? It's a serious work of art. Hold on, I want to come back. Let me come back to the first one so you can see it again from a distance. What a beautiful composition for a rug as well, right? Yeah, I mean, this is just very, very hard to find. They do exist. They are out there. Take a good look if you want to start collecting, because they are hard to track down. And obviously, condition would be a thing if you're thinking about it as a collector. This is a super mid-century modern piece. The shape of the flowers, the oversized fatness of the flowers, the graphic shadowing is very clever. And that really spiky, sort of atomic looking flower on the right, really stylized. I would say, if I was to put a year on this, I'd say 1955, that kind of thing. They do exist. You can find them online with, like, clowns' heads, faces, things like that, but not this size, right? As a child's craft, much, much smaller scale. But you do see stuff with beans. You see stuff with corn kernels, like corn on the cob kernels, aquarium sand, sand art. It doesn't look exactly like this, but it's the same kind of feel where you are pouring sand of a certain color into different feels of the composition, and then you stick it into place, and there Bob's your uncle. It is an exceptional example. Unique example. My mom says that is crazy. I just read yesterday when rice was used in a mixture of mortar to make the Great Wall of China. Oh, who would have thunk? I would never have thunk. Karen says morning glories in full bloom on the left, bud on the right. So beautiful, isn't it? In the black background too. Very mid-century, very theatrical. Amazing piece of work. I was super happy to find this, as I never would have thought to look for a rice piece to show you for tonight. Maybe this one will be a little bit easier. So my question for you with this image is, what is this object? Do you think that this is a fortune teller? Do you think that this is a carnival wheel? Or do you think that this is an early darts board? I'll wait a second. And I have to say, particularly in light of this day and age, there is, I'm not going to say the word, but there is a symbol in the center. And you have to remember this piece is circa 1925. And that symbol until World War II was a symbol for good luck. So just be thoughtful about that. It is a symbol that we see turn up in Victoriana and folk art. And it will always be there because it was a symbol of good luck before it turned into something awful. All right. So I'm not propagating anything awful. As you know me, right? I'm never going to get enough water in my body right now. Judy says, carnival wheel. Ooh, carnival board. This looks like something that you would see at a carnival, doesn't it? It looks almost like a gambling kind of a wheel that you would expect to find at a carnival. You would fully expect to be ripped off, right? This is actually a fortune teller. This is a 1925 fortune telling device that was it was for use at home. It was called the Mystiscope or Mystiscope fortune teller. And let me show you what the packaging looked like, because then you'll go, aha, this is what the box looked like for it. So it does look very mystical, doesn't it? There's like a picture of like a scene from the Far East. That must be where all the mysticism happens, right? The device that thinks. So 1925, we are in that era of, we have seen many versions of, for example, a Ouija board at this point. We are in the 1920s. We are coming out of the Victorian. We are out of the Victorian period, but we still have the sort of remnants of that love of mysticism and spiritualism. And there are a lot of board games and books and even sheet music at this time that revolve around the idea of mysticism and fortune telling. So while fortune telling games later in the 20th century become kind of a joke and like a party thing or something to goof around with, earlier in the 20th century people put a lot more stock in fortune telling games. I wouldn't say like Zoltan, right, on the carnival pier, like reading your fortune in a machine at the end of the pier. I wouldn't say people necessarily believed in that kind of stuff, but something like this with so many apparently mathematical formulas. A lot of people did believe in this stuff, and they weren't necessarily stupid people. There was just such a powerful fashion for mysticism that a lot of people got swept away in that. So you could see that this is the chart, right? So this is mystic combinations, all in one word. They were carefully sort of trademarking and patenting all of these words that they were using. You see the infinite combinations, and the book would tell you what your combination meant. So as you can imagine, this is a little bit more evolved than a Ouija board. I mean, you would spin the thing and you would have combinations. You could spin it 3 times for 3 different combinations for inner, middle, outer, whatever, 4 times. And depending, 5 times actually, if you count the shapes in the middle, right? Because they all meant something. It's almost like a deck of tarot cards. If you choose to not use them for their original purpose, and their original purpose was to play cards, if you instead choose to use them for fortune telling or spiritualist purposes, because you get something out of it that way, that is not the original purpose. But if you do use them that way and you enjoy using them that way, then they can become meaningful, right? Same thing with this device, right? Or a horoscope, right? Reading a horoscope. You get your result when you spin. You look up the solution. And man, if you want it enough, you're going to go, oh God, I knew love was coming to me this week. I could just feel it, right? You always want the good news to come, or you can put a kind of abstract spin on the news to make it what you hope for. And I apologize if I'm being offensive if you are a real serious spiritualist and you feel like, no, these things have value. Who knows, right? I certainly don't know. I don't know anything. I guess this is as good as anything in this world. But what a lot of fun to play with this and to experiment with this in 1925, right? You can see people sitting around really having a lot of fun with this and getting some interesting answers, maybe having some laughs thinking about their results. These are objects that you're probably familiar with. These are I'm going to show you some stoneware objects. And I'm going to ask you first, right? So I'm not giving you choices here. This is a J&E Norton stoneware jug. And this is one of the most collectible stoneware brands. And it says it at the top, right? So it's stamped, provenance is here, it's all good. These came from Bennington, Vermont. Just look at this for a second. How much do you think this sold for at auction 3 years ago? How much do you think this sold for? 3 years ago was not that long ago. It's not like it was 15 years ago, right? Just take a while to guess while I take a quick sip. Obviously, guess high, because I wouldn't be showing you this segment if it was like $45, right? If it was $45, you get the bargain of the century because you get to have a house too. Not quite with this one, but if you are familiar with collecting stoneware, you already know about the J&E Norton brand. And you know that when you see these, you pick them up if you can, because there is no messing around with this. Is that 100? No, that's 10,000. Kathy says 10,000. Kathy, that is a great guess. The answer is $54,000. $54,000 in 2021. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. Do you have one of these at home, anybody? Holy mackerel. Talk about an area of collecting that is worth talking about and revisiting. Now, not only are these stoneware jugs incredible inspirations, these are early 20th century, and then there's an earthquake. Exactly, Catherine. Talk about, oh my God, forget about the rice spilling, right? Forget about your rice colors getting mixed up. If there's an earthquake and this thing falls, holy mackerel. This is a huge area for collectors. People love these stoneware jugs. Stoneware everything, not just jugs. They are primitives collectors. They are country collectors, Americana collectors. These are absolutely, they're so desirable. They are so beautiful in terms of design, and there's only a limited number of each design. You'll find more than one chicken in this exact same pose. Will they look the same every time? Not at all, because it's hand painted. So if you look up this chicken on Google Lens, you'll see it again, but you'll see that it's lighter, maybe darker, maybe just a little bit different, right? Because people are hand painting them. So if you are a collector, and I am not a collector of pottery or any kind of stoneware, not at all, because for this reason, right? Because of cats and dogs and kids. And also just me, I'm not a particular klutz, but man, I don't want this kind of liability. This piece sold for $18,000 in 2022. This piece sold for $14,400 in 2023. This is a crock. So this isn't a jug, right? This isn't even a jug. A jug would be the most valuable kind of item. This is a crock, and this is not a crock. It sold for 14.4. So, while I'm not necessarily showing you the sequence so that you can say, oh, I think I'm going to start collecting these. If you have the wallet for that, man, do it. These are absolutely beautiful. Just be obviously so careful. They are great inspiration for what we do. There is so much crossover appeal between particularly the Norton stoneware and rug hooking, right? Primitive design in general. You could see how easy it would be to do a line drawing like this. Now, many of these jugs do have dates associated with them if you research them online, because these are early 20th century, right? If they are before 1929 or they are 1929, then you're good to go with making a design that has this. As soon as you get into 1930, in the 1930s, the design would still be under copyright because it is a visual arts piece, right? This one is the most expensive. This, as it would be, right? This is a gallon churn. 6-gallon churn. It looks like an umbrella thing, which maybe people used it for. This was $132,000. But it is isn't it spectacular? I mean, honestly, this, for me, because I'm not a pottery collector at all. I don't collect anything like pottery or ceramics at all. For me, I could easily go into an antique store and see this for $50 and go, yeah, I don't really need it. Like, I don't really need a thing for umbrellas. I think a lot of us would not be people who would, if you know, right? But it's not like, some things are obviously very valuable and you go, oh, is that like, is that a jeer sculpture, right? Is that copper thing a jeer? Is that an antique hook drug? Is that a Grenfell mat? For me, I could see this and think, yeah, no, that's a nice horse. And good Lord, $132,000, right? That's impressive. Dave says, after purchasing the churn, they now eat margarine. Yeah, right? Kelly says, Row Pottery is where I am from in Wisconsin. and we'll be, oh, that'll be your postcard exchange for Wish You Were Here. Oh, that's so cool. Now, Kelly, what does row pottery look like? Is it like, first of all, do you know how long it's been there? Is it like, does it go back to early 20th century, like art pottery? And is it like matte finish pottery? Is it like glazed? Is it drippy? I wonder if it has a look. I'll have to look it up. That's really interesting. I can't wait to see how those evolve. That is going to be a lot of fun. What a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm quite close to Beddington, and I wasn't even aware of this company. Again, because this is the kind of thing that flies by my radar, weirdly enough. All right, so let me see what question I'm going to ask you here. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to be careful. I'm careful before I present the question because I'm always afraid I'm going to say something that gives the answer away. When you look at these items, where do you think, these are from the early 20th century, where do you think somebody would acquire these items, right? It's early 20th century. You have some of these on your kitchen table. You're looking at them. Maybe you're going to turn them into a quilt. Where did you get them? Did you get them as a grocery store promotion? Did you get them at a carnival as a prize? Did you get them in a tobacco packet? Where did you pick up your felts or flannels? They were referred to as both. Have you seen these before? Kelly says 1975 salt glazed. Jim Rowe is a big deal and really made the village of Cambridge a tourist place. Oh, that is so cool. I feel like, oh, hey, Ted.
Hey.
I feel like I want to check that out next time I go to Wisconsin, which I was hoping to do in March, but I am a little bit scared to fly right now, I got to say.
Oh,
there he is. There he is.
Hey.
There he is. Hey, my man.
Hey.
Happy Friday night. How's it going?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. He coming to say hi.
Thank you.
Yeah, there
Love
he
you.
is. Love you too, sweetie. Love you. Good night, sweetie. I'll see you in a little while.
Love you.
Alrighty. Bubblegum cards. That's a great one. Gas station. Fantastic. These are great guesses. These are great guesses because these are the kinds of places where you would find what were then called premiums. And you know, it was recently that even with McDonald's and Burger King, stuff like that, you would say, thanks, Gail. Gail says hi, Teddy. And Gami says hi. Until recently, you would get something from McDonald's and you wouldn't say like, oh, it's the toy and the Happy Meal. You'd say like, what's the premium right now? The premium was like the promotion thing that they were giving out. They gave you something that was at a premium when you spent X amount of money or you bought a certain thing. And these are great places. Gas stations had lots of premiums. Bubblegum cards always had premiums. Cereal boxes did in our lifetimes, right? KJ, BP, you are right. It is a tobacco package. That is the correct answer. These are tobacco felts. So let's come back over here because these are a great thing that are not that expensive that we can find that are so much fun to think about. And they are very easy to find. There's lots of them online, like on eBay. These are tobacco felts or sometimes called flannels. I found this text on Worth Point, right? I'm going to kind of wing it too because I have a collection of tobacco felts. They were actually in the package, right? So it wasn't like it was wrapped around a box. It was a bag. It was like the era of the bag of tobacco. So they were like in the bag with the tobacco. And you would dig it out like you would a toy out of the cereal box. So these felts did come in various sizes, but most typically there are two sizes. They're small. I don't know if I wrote down the size. Probably like mine are something like maybe 4 inches long, maybe 2.5 by 4, something like that. There is a much larger size that's more like 6 or 7 inches long. And they do have different motifs with the different sizes. I'm thinking, I mean, I never bought mine in a tobacco flannel. I bought them all at yard sales and antique stores. But they can range in size from like 3, 4, 5 inches to 30 inches, right? I've never seen ones that are that size. Many of them are 6 by 8, it says, including butterflies. They have quite a few butterflies. University seals, right? Almost like banners, like almost like the pennants. Different universities, different destinations. Some of them look like little oriental carpets of the day. These are the ones that look like pennants, wild animals, right? Because they also serve like exactly like a Cracker Jack box, exactly. And what a lot of fun, right? I mean, would it be fun to get, I don't know, Ohio if you lived in Rhode Island? Maybe not. But getting anything for free is fun, isn't it? And I think particularly in the early 20th century, with times being as tough as they were, getting anything for free was fun. You know, different animals, exotic animals, things that made you feel patriotic, things that educated you. My mom says also flag pennants and tobacco back in the day when we used to roll cigarettes by hand. Okay, so they were still in there. Interesting. Yeah, that was not that long ago. Tobacco carpets. Yeah, so people would just along with the idea of like feed sack quilts and that kind of thing. There were even Cupid dolls. That was another. Oops, I don't want to. I'm not going to leave this page yet until I finish this text because we're on the next thing. People would put them together and incorporate them into crazy quilts and traditional quilts. I mean, you would really obviously have to smoke a lot if you're going to make a whole quilt out of flannels, but it would be an interesting kind of composite quilt if you cut off the fringe and you use them as just a printed piece of material. They are printed. So interesting. And if you happen to get something that was like your alma mater or something like that, or something to do with where you were from, some of them look like animal pelts. Like it actually looks like some of them look like a bear carpet, like all stretched out, or like a exotic animals, cheetahs and zebra and stuff like that. There are so many different ones. I always collected the butterflies. I feel like there was another kind that I looked for. I can't think of what they were now. I haven't seen mine. They've got to be downstairs in the basement. I haven't seen them in a while. But I started collecting them when I was more of a quilter than a rug hooker. And I really thought that I would use them for a quilt, and I might yet use them for a quilt if I make a quilt. They would be fun to incorporate into a hooked rug. It would be an interesting challenge if you had them, right? If there's like a group of us who had like tobacco felts, to say like, ooh, challenge, incorporate a tobacco felt into a piece of rug hooking, because then it's basically a picture within a picture, isn't it? It would be an interesting thing to think about. And yeah, KJBP says great marketing. Buy more to try to get different designs. Absolutely. I mean, it is brilliant marketing, and there's just not enough of this these days. There's less and less stuff for free. There's nothing in cereal boxes. I mean, I haven't gotten anything in a cereal box. These kids don't even know about stuff in cereal boxes, and they have even noticed that the garbage at McDonald's. I mean, we probably shouldn't go there to begin with, but it is delicious, you know. It's garbage. Like it's absolute garbage that they give them. And even they say at their ages, 12, 11 and 13, you know, when they were little, they say this, when they were little, they had such good toys at McDonald's and Burger King, Wendy's, right? All of them. And not anymore, you know, not anymore. It's so strange how fast things can change. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, it would inspire you. I mean, if I was collecting the butterflies, I would lose my mind, just like with stamps or whatever. I would lose my mind trying to get the butterfly with whatever, the gray background, or, you know, God, what a lot of fun. And something to think about too, isn't it? Things like this are so engaging. Now, here comes a quilt, right? So this is like an early 20th century quilt. I know there's some quilters out there. What style of quilt, for the most part, I'm not talking about the little center, right? Not the little center. I'm talking about the rest of the quilt. What style of quilt is this? Is this an around the world quilt? Is this a postage stamp quilt? Or is this a flying geese quilt? Kathy says, when I was young, grocery stores did encyclopedias. The first one was usually free. Oh, the first one's always free, right? You had a lot of A's. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Yes, you are all right about the quilt, by the way. It is a postage stamp quilt. And let me make it a little bit larger now that we know. You can see the scale of this is crazy. So this is something that is for sale now. I believe it was, oh gosh, it's awful. I forgot what site I found this on. It was one of the current auction sites. I think it was $1,850, 1850. You all know this. That's great. Let me open this up. A postage stamp quilt is the ultimate scrap kind of quilt because you can use the tiniest little squares. Sometimes they were 1 inch squares, right? And they were referred to as like 1 inch or 1 inch quilts. But postage stamp quilt, I think, is a more charming way to refer to these, and we don't know if they're 1 inch squares. You can see how many squares we're talking about here, and this is a hand sewn quilt, and it is the way that it is quilted, right, is by sort of tufting it, right? I'm trying to think of the quilting term for when you secure the front, the back, and the quilted interior with, what do you call this, quilters? With a little piece of yarn, a tide. It's a tide quilt, right? It's not quilted, like there's not stitching going through it, holding the 3 components in place. It's tied. So you can see where there's little sort of tufts of yarn. That's where it's being tied. So this is a nice early quilt. There's a lot of work in here. There's a lot of hours in here. Can you imagine? I mean, it's not like it would have taken years, though, is it? You could see in between stuff, waiting for, watching a pot to boil. You can see kind of sitting there, right? If you're hand stitching, and you could stitch 9, 16, quite a few together pretty quickly while you were doing something else. And then there it is. And then you make another block, and maybe they're attached that way. I don't think they're attached like in rows or anything like that. I think they're probably attached in 9 blocks. But I could be wrong. If it was a different pattern, this could be called a 9-block quilt. If there was a pattern that repeated, in such a way that it drew attention to the fact that blocks of 9 were the individual units, then it would be called a 9-block. So that would be a different quilt altogether. This is absolutely a scrap quilt where there is no pattern whatsoever. And so we can safely call this a postage stamp quilt. You can see how many beautiful different pieces of fabric are here. What a variety. What a great romantic use of all of these little scraps of color, and probably a lot of feed sack quilts in here, and old garments, probably a lot of kitchen textiles in here. Bright and cheerful, really, really lovely. How much do you think this, I already told you. Oh, and it's on First Dibs. Everything on First Dibs is $18.50. Everything on First Dibs is quite a lot, right? They're not fooling around. It's not like you get a bargain on there. But it is a lovely quilt, and you can make offers, right? If you feel like, too rich for my blood, you can always make an offer, and you never know, right? Now, this is going to be another question I have for you that we might be a little early tonight, actually. I think we're blazing through these quickly. Gosh, I should have done some more. I do have a few more. This is going to be another question that you tell me the answer. I'm not going to give you multiple choice here. What rug making technique is this? Do you know? Let's look at it for a second. I'll show you another image before we move on. Let's just look at it for a second and see what we can tell just by looking at this close up. It's thick. It's going to be thick. It looks like standing wool, but it's not. It's not standing wool. This is a kind of rug that does not have a foundation, does not have a piece of foundation fabric, right? So how is it being held together? If it doesn't have a foundation fabric, if you're thinking, oh, it must be sewn, it's actually not sewn. Wendy, you got it. I think that's a typo. It's shearing. It's a technique that's called either Shereé or plie. And both of those words, it is shearing. It is absolutely shearing. Shearing is when, I'm going to come back to plie and Shereé. Shearing is when something is ruched, right? When something is ruched, like a long strip is ruched like a little caterpillar, right? And it becomes very wavy and puckery, right? Sheared. Not standing wool. And I'll show you why, because I'm going to show you how it's made. The idea of making a sheared rug, the craft becomes known first as plie, like pleated crochet, and then more famously, in the later 20th century, it becomes known as Shereé. And Shereé, Shirret, double R, Shirret, is a patented name by a family who does this. And I've talked about this on Coffee Time before, and in one of the live shows when I was at one of the fiber festivals. They have, I don't want to say hijacked, but this craft, Shereé or plie or shearing, was typically done, traditionally done with a kind of a crochet hook that was long and skinny. I'm going to show you the tool in just a second, but I just want to show you what pieces that are done. The answer with this one is actually Shereé, because I'm showing you examples of this craft, which is the same as shearing and it is the same as plie, but I know that these are Shereé because of the way that they were marked, like online, right? It was noted that this was done with the Shereé tool, which is different than the other tools. It has one minor alteration that was a large enough change to the tool that made it possible for people to start calling it something different. I have to admit, when I first saw this rug, I thought it was going to say boob, because I saw like BOO and the pink centers. You see what I mean? But I think it just says boo. But my point is that you can make lots of different shapes with it. My mind is still in the gutter right here. Really, it doesn't have to be rectangles or circles, right? That's what I'm getting at. It can be really oddball shapes, because like with standing wool, you can add onto pieces and then put them together and work around them again. It is done with a tool that looks like a crochet hook, but it's finer and it's much, much, much longer. And you're actually poking the tip of the crochet hook, so it's tiny, through a wide strip of material. It doesn't have to be wool, right? But you have to poke the tip of that thing through the material. So if you've got some kind of thick, dense polyester, it's probably not going to happen, because it's going to be so difficult to poke that tool through it so many times. And you basically accordion it onto the tool. The difference between the original tool that looked like a skinny crochet hook and the plie tool, which is still available on Amazon, plie meant pleated crochet. Shereé meant shearing and crochet. Like they're both combos of the very literal words for how this craft is done. This is the Shereé hook, and the difference between the Shereé hook and every previous hook, and the reason they're allowed to copyright, the family's allowed to copyright Shereé this, Shereé that, Shereé everything, when this is a much older craft, early 20th century craft, right? Not like a 1980s craft, which is when the Shereé started. The reason they're able to say Shereé and not let anybody else say Shereé is because the adaptation they made to this tool was they put the bend in it. And you might think to yourself, that's very silly. How could that be a thing? It is a thing, because if you've ever done this craft, the biggest pain in the you-know-what is that you could not get your caterpillar, your ruched piece, to stay put while you were working on the rest of it. And putting that one little bend in the tool stops it. It stops it from moving down and slipping away from you when you want it to stay put. It sounds crazy, but do the craft and you'll know what I mean. It's impossible for me to do it without a bent Shereé hook. So it's still a crochet hook. It has a sharp one end and the crocheted other end. And what it does is you're poking through the material. You're ruching it up like a caterpillar. And then you are literally, let me come back to this photo, you are literally crocheting. Let me do this one's maybe better. It's crocheted, right? Once it's on the thing, you're crocheting, you're nipping in between the ruffles, grabbing it and creating kind of a lace work or a sort of cobweb crocheted pattern that holds the whole thing together. You're creating a net for it as you go. So you're attaching to the ones before it. You start in the middle. You're attaching to the ones before it by crocheting onto it as you go. So it's a little bit tricky to learn. The things that you really have to be prepared for are you really need materials that are very similar in width. So it's great to cut them to rip them, to cut them with a quilting rotary cutter. They should be similar, otherwise you might find yourself trimming it later. Shereé uses an extraordinary amount of wool, as you can see, right? This is just a dense piece of wool, and it's very hard to do it very thin because it flip-flops in your hands, and it's very hard to grab the string of the one before that you need to crochet onto. It's very hard to grab it if it's too thin and it's doing flippity floppities. So having something substantial that's a little bit thicker is definitely easier. Yeah, it is a great way to use salvage, and it doesn't, like I say, it doesn't have to be wool. I see a lot of these with like polyester knits and cut up old vintage clothing. You can do it with cotton, but the thing with cotton is that if you're using like clothing cotton or quilting cotton, it will look very washed out and white because you're seeing the side of the material, not the top of the material. So with this craft, unlike what we do, we see the top of the wool, we see the loop, right? You're seeing the edge. And if you're using material that when you cut the edge, it looks very white, your piece is not going to be vibrant, right? So these are all things that you need to consider. It's a completely different form. But if you're interested, look up the website, Shereé, Shirret. There are classes. They have an Etsy store as well, with the tool, with patterns. With the cording, So you can use like heavyweight string or like waxy string, but they sell cording that's in different colors, and that's fun too. It's a little bit waxy. It's very polished. They sell it on big spools. It's thick and it's strong, because just like with the rice, if you've been working on it for a while and you're way out on the outside and that thing is being held together by the strings, and you do kind of knot as you go, but you don't want the whole thing to fall apart when you're at the end, right? It's all being held together essentially by the same piece of string. You don't want such a flimsy piece of thready string that it like falls apart at the end. So it is good to use a thicker kind of very heavyweight string yarn. I don't even want to say thread because it's thicker than thread. But you also don't want to use something like yarn for crocheting. You want to use something that's very structured, because you need to be able to grab it with that tiny hook easy and fast, or it's going to take forever to do this form. It's very different. Oh, Wendy, thank you so much. Next Friday is my birthday, so I'll be on for gallery night next Sunday, March 2nd. So next Friday, I'll be doing stuff for my birthday, but then on Sunday, we'll have our gallery night, and I'm already looking forward to that. This is a great art form. It is a lot of fun, and yeah, something to look up. She's very local. I always say I'm going to go visit with her, and I haven't done it yet, and shame on me. I really should. She's a very nice, it's the mom and the two daughters have learned how to do it. I think the daughters are the ones who are teaching it at this point. Really fun. To be honest, it's not my favorite form, but it is something different, and it's great. It's great to be able to learn other forms of fiber arts, particularly rug making, that you could cross over to your rug hooking. Now, a lot of you guessed standing wool, and it does look like standing wool. Standing wool is done with a needle and thread, right? And you're attaching, either it's standing on its own, right? And you're going with a needle and thread through it, and it's being held together by a needle and thread through it, and there's no backing. Or you're doing standing wool in like a quillie or something like that, and you're attaching it onto your foundation fabric. Standing wool is not done with a crochet hook, so this is a little bit different. But just like with standing wool, you can do Shereé, plie, or shirring, any of these forms, all the same thing. You can do it in like rectangles or in little lines, and then you could, in theory, use that as a border, right? You could have it attached to your foundation fabric, or you could do it super nice and attach it to your border. Would it be fiddly to do that? Yes. And you'd have to be really careful about the heights and how they all connected. But you could, in theory, Shereé a border, and then you would have to sew it onto your rug hooked piece, or sew it onto your foundation fabric. But it is a very different look, right? It would be very puzzling for people to look at. It has a lot more height, so you'd have to reconcile that in your planning of the piece. It's much thicker than anything we would do typically as rug hookers. Interesting, right? Like floss Karen, but still thicker. Like it's not like DMC. It's more like trying to think of. I was thinking kite, but it's even thicker than kite floss string. It's even thicker than that. It's like it's cotton and it's polished and it's like you'd never be able to like floss your teeth with it. It's much thicker than that. Very, it's not thick like rope. It's much thicker than any thread I can think of. It's I'm trying to think of what you might use it for that you would go, oh, it's that kind of thread. It comes on a spool like a kite, like kite string comes on a spool, but it is thicker than that too. Like a pearl cotton. The material is right. The finish is like a pearl cotton, but it's thick. It's thick. God damn it! I wish I had. Sorry for the swear. I wish I had one here because I have a bunch of the spools of it. It's more like it's thicker than, for example, sock yarn, and it's not floppy at all, right? It's because it's very rigid. It's not like cording. It's not that thick, but it's just a very sort of no nonsense thin cord or thick yarn, like waxed cording, but super thin. If we're talking about cording, then super thin, like a thread for a sashiko. No, thicker than that. Thicker than that. Butcher twine. Thank you. Butcher twine. That's what it's like. Little bit thicker. But it's the most like butcher twine. That's the closest thing that's exactly what I wanted. That's the closest thing I can think of. It's like that, but not lumpy bumpy. Like if you're thinking of butcher, if you're thinking of the white stuff, yes. If you're thinking of like twine, like the brown stuff, not butcher's twine, not like that because it's not nubby. It's perfectly flat because it can't play you. When you're putting together something that's Shereé, you've got all of those little ruffles and you're going between the folds, right? The folds of the material to catch the string before it. And you're connecting them with a crochet stitch. So fiddly factors through the roof. And you can't use a cord that is lumpy bumpy or that's going to play you or that's very slack because you would never get any speed going. It's very plain Jane. Butcher's twine. It's like butcher's twine, like that white stuff. It's like that, a little bit thicker, and it comes in like Mason's twine. I don't know Mason's twine. Not like tapestry wool at all. Much more rigid. Yeah, they come. I think I have it in orange, maybe like a mustard yellow, and in a blue. And I don't know why I got them in different colors because you really can't see it unless you pry the thing apart. Then you have to pry it apart to see it. It's just like with rug hooking, unless you like are doing like the looking for ticks on the dog and in between the loops, you really don't see your backing fabric. It's the same kind of thing. You don't see it unless you lift it up. If it's a chair seat and you lift it up, then you can see the white, right? Because it'll flop, the whole chair pad will flop in your hand, not fall apart, but flop in your hand, and then you can see that it's made from yellow or white or whatever. So it is not it's a gimmick, isn't it? Selling the twine in different colors, but it is kind of cool if you're doing an all blue piece to use the blue twine, right? Just another little thing, and why not? The twine is super inexpensive. It's like $3 for a bobbin of it, like a spool of it. Very fun. Yeah, check out their website, the Shereé website. I don't know. I think there's more on the Etsy store than on their actual website. Because I know she has videos and stuff too, so she might have some stuff on YouTube. But it's fun to look at what the supplies are, and it's fun to look at what some of their patterns are. I think when you buy, my memory is when you buy the basic kit, it does not come with the material, right? You have to figure out the material. You have to cut it yourself. But it does come with twine, and it does come with the tool, and it does come with directions, and possibly the book. Like there is a book of patterns. There might even be more than one book, but I think there's one book that's kind of like a glorified pamphlet. There's only so many patterns you can do with this, right? So they're not going to show you the boobs or the boo, right? They're not going to show that one. Once you get good, you figure out, like with standing wool, how you can manipulate each ruche or swing it this way instead of that way or like if you do braided rugs and you do them in non-traditional formations, you figure out with experience how to swing things in different ways and part things so that the shapes kind of deviate and travel. You can do that with Shereé, and that's how you get those what's the word? Sort of not standard borders. How you get these irregular borders. And those kinds of patterns are in the book with explanations and descriptions. So it's very fun. It's very different. It's cutting a lot of wool. But you know what would work great? You know what would work great? If you are a person who thought that you would love traditional rug braiding and you ended up not loving it, that's the material you want to use. Depending on how wide your sort of cinnamon rolls are of your braiding wool, you either want them just as they are. If they're like, an inch, that's good. Half an inch is too small for Shereé. It's too flippity floppity for Shereé. You want it closer to an inch. But maybe you have a bunch of the cinnamon wheels of the, to do rug braiding, maybe even wider. Then possibly you could cut them in half and use those for Shereé. Anything is possible. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. It's not something that I'm going to do anytime soon, like videos, because it's completely its own thing and it's not super transferable to rug cooking. It's not transferable enough for me to work on with the magazine and with the books I'm trying to get out this year. But if anybody does go down the Shereé rabbit hole and you start making stuff, please take photos. We would love to see it for gallery night. It's such different work. It really is. And it still has that lovely, tactile, lush feel of a fiber art, even maybe more so than other fiber arts, because you're using big woolly, if you're using wool, strips of material. Just remember that side thing. The side thing is a thing. With wool, the sides of wool are still beautiful and vibrant, but if you're talking about cotton or poly, the side might not be pretty. And I've had these too. I have some that I just took out of the studio that look just so crappy because it just looks white, like a tree trunk, but just with white, like it was like a mistake. And the person probably thought, oh God, right, as they were making it, like, maybe this will get better, right? But it's not going to get better because you've got the cross section of the material, not the top of the material or the bottom. Interesting craft. All right, let's see. Okay, so here comes another question, and maybe you'll know the answer to this one because the question is, what kind of rug is this, right? How was this rug made? Do you know what kind of rug this is? This is a rug form that we have talked about quite a bit, but I want to talk about it some more. Let me just take a sip of water. Now, I will tell you, I recorded a couple of videos, maybe the summer before last, when I went down to Maryland to talk to Melinda Bird at Bird Call Studio. And yes, Karen, this is a Rhea rug. Karen, you made a Rhea rug with the vintage Rhea rug fabric, right? And yes, Kathy. Yes, Wendy, you all remember. Karen, you made a Rhea rug on, what was it, linen with a latch hook? Was it with a latch hook and the vintage Rhea rug fabric? Is my memory right, or is a variation on that? These Rhea rugs are such a lot of fun. This is another completely different form to think about. Let me show you some examples of a Rhea rug. This Rhea rug, some things that they always are. High pile, so heavily pixelated. Can you do like a high definition, very detailed Rhea rug? You can if it's enormous, but the whole prestige of a Rhea rug is that it is cut with a high pile. Do you cut as you go yourself? And can you control the height of the pile? Yes. So can you cut it shorter? No. Because a Rhea rug specifically is on this backing, right? These Rhea rug backings are Scandinavian, and the backings, as far as I know when I was visiting Melinda Bird, she was trying to import Rhea rug backings, but she hadn't yet. They are woven, and they have, this is what the back of the rug looks like. Rows, right? And it's into the rows. The rows are open. The strips that you see, the white strips, closed and thick woven backing. where the stitches are, where the rows are, where the stitches have been, um, holes, lots of little holes. And that's where your needle goes. This is a needle craft. This is not a hook craft. So this is a needle craft. And so when we're talking about Rhea rugs, let me show you a couple more, and then we'll talk a little bit for a second about the way that they're put together. This isn't. We tend to see Rhea rugs that are very abstract in their composition because of the pixelated quality of the finished rug. So let me come to you here for a minute so that we can talk really clearly. Just as a reminder, if I'm making a Rhea rug, I have to make it on that Rhea rug backing. Well, Karen, you made one on linen, right? So you use Rhea material, which is wool, right? Specific, and you use the pre-cut because there were Rhea rug kits, like mid-century kits, going right to like the 1970s, and then they phased out because latch hook kits, which are basically the same idea, were produced more cheaply and kind of overtook the Rhea rug, which is a traditional rug that is traditionally wool. So latch hooks with their acrylic kits and their pre-cut material completely overtook the idea of doing a Rhea rug, which is way more expensive to execute. So so they phased out. Rhea rugs like went extinct for quite a long time until Melinda Bird's family brought them back. I used a Rhea needle. Okay, so Karen, you used the Rhea needle, sew a needle on the Rhea backing of my own design. So Karen, didn't you do one though that was with a latch, or you did latch on the linen? Am I crossing two different projects of yours? So you did do something on Rhea backing as well, because there's the gray area, right? Because remember when I went to visit Melinda, let me finish this first. If you're making a true Rhea rug, right? If we're talking about a true Rhea rug, it's like, is that a Tiffany stained glass window? Sort of, it's a stained glass window. Okay, but it's not a Tiffany glass window because there are certain properties to it, right? Like it being made by the Tiffany company that have to, is it, does it have slag glass in it, or is it all cathedral glass, right? There would be conversations. Same thing with the Rhea rug. The things that make a Rhea rug are the backing, and the backing looks like this, right? And it's got, oh, hey, Joss, you coming to say hi?
Is this the place?
What place?
Everything.
Honey, I'm doing a show right now. I have no idea. I'm doing a show. Sorry. Joss, Arian, get her out of here. I'm going to flip my flipper.
Is it the one in orange?
It's orange.
Another one is blue.
Oh my God. And now she's going to want me to take her to the trampoline park after she just wound me up. Not tonight. A Rhea rug is on Rhea backing, right? It's a specific woven backing, and it has lines that run across it. Tiny lines, tons and tons and tons of lines. When you're making a Rhea rug, right, you typically are starting at the bottom and you're working your way across with your needle, right? Why? Because you're going to sew it with loops like this, right? You sew it and it makes loops as you go, and then you cut the loops. So there are tools, if you want, you don't have to use the tools, but there are tools as you go that you wrap around like a ruler, like a wooden ruler, to be sure that they're all the same height. And as soon as you get to the end of that stitch, right, the needle only does so many loops, then you can trim them. And then you needle up and you go across some more and you do a few more stitches and then you cut them. And it's cut pile, right? So you have to do it row by row. You can't say, I'd like to do the flower in the center first, because then that pile will be in the way when you're sewing immediately under it, right? So it's like a haircut, right? You have to see where your hands are now, so you do it in order so that the part that you've done so far isn't in the way of where your needle is now. That'll slow you down and play you, right? You wouldn't do that on purpose. So one of the things about a Rhea rug that makes it a Rhea rug is the Rhea backing, and it is like a cotton or a cotton poly backing. And again, I'm not sure if Melinda has been successful in importing backing to now. It is a woven, but it's woven very specifically with those rows that are open. They're open in that there's just a few stitches holding them together so that you can get through the stitches, because you wouldn't want to put a needle through the whole rug. It's very thick, right? It's very substantial. That's why you need those little open rows. They're like little window panes with fewer stitches, so your needle goes in and out quickly. So your piece ends up being very line driven, and you've got to be careful of doing it in order so you don't confuse your hands and the needle as it grows, right? If you're doing a rhea rug and your material, let's say that this is 3 feet across, whatever you do, your rhea rug is going to be 3 feet across, right? There's no cropping it. There's no this side is secure, the selvage, and so is this, but you can't cut it in the middle and make odd shapes, right? It will be this size. It can be, right, say that this is 3.5 feet long. Well, it could be 7 feet long if you have a long piece of rhea backing, but you can't change this you can't change this measurement. So you decide before you start, do I want my rug to be on a backing that's 2 feet across, 10 feet across? How wide do I want? I don't think there is 10 feet across. Well, maybe there is. How wide do I want my backing to be? Right? You have to plan that first because this can't change. Now, with a traditional rhea rug, you're using wool. It doesn't matter what kind of needle you use. That's not important, but you're using wool. And it does look a little bit like the Persian wool we were talking about earlier, but a little bit thicker. And it is so lushly and beautifully colored. It's not super thick. You could use other material. Now, here comes a variation, because if you think about this, right? So I just described to you, you can sew the backings together to make a bigger rug. That's a great point, Karen. You definitely can do that. You actually go left to right, Karen. Thank you. Thank you. You go left to right. Karen says, but I use the latch hook on linen for a different project. Okay. So the idea, so Karen's saying I'm crossing wires. She did a different project that looked like a rhea rug, but it was part of a composition had latch hook technique on linen. So when you think, oh, I can only do latch hook on latch hook backing, no, you can also do it on linen. You can do it on whatever you can get the hook through without, mayhem and destruction. You can do it on anything. If we're talking about what is a rhea rug, right? I described what a rhea rug was. It has a special backing. It's made in that specific way, and it is made with wool. Now, right? And this conversation, and no disrespect to Melinda, because I love Melinda. One of the reasons that rhea rugs kind of became extinct is because they were so dang expensive to make, right? It's a lot of material. It's a lot of wool. Can you make a rhea rug with different material? Of course. Of course you could. You could even make a rhea rug that looks similar, right? You could make a rhea rug. The backing is not expensive. It's the material. It's the wool that's expensive. Could you make a rhea rug with, for example, acrylic? Of course you could, right? But then could we call it a rhea rug? I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's not a large enough category of craft that there are defined rules, right? It's really just Melinda Bird's family that nailed down this craft. So there's not sort of a wide enough survey to say, well, then it's not really a rhea rug. I couldn't say one way or the other. But I know that Melinda firmly believes that a rhea rug has a specific backing and is made out of wool. And that if those two things are substituted, that we're not exactly talking about a rhea rug anymore. So you can take it or leave it, that sort of philosophy. But of course, if you find other ways in your rug making to, I don't want to say cut corners, but if you find ways to do substitutions that are common sense substitutions with supplies that are a little less expensive or supplies you already have, like Karen did, do it. Why not do it, right? If you're a purist, you want to do it the way that they are traditionally made. But if you're just like, man, this acrylic yarn isn't going to hook itself, then that's the stuff to use, right? You could do the same technique using different supplies. The thing is to know how to do it, right? And I did it. I have to say the tutorial that we did together, the first half of the video was kind of picking out the colors and drawing something directly onto the backing. And the second half, I think, was me actually starting to make the rhea rug, and she was watching my stitches and watching me go. And it's a very comprehensive pair of videos. So if you look up rhea rugs on the Ribbon Candy Hooking channel, you will find it. And as soon as you see my hands doing it, you're going to go, oh man, this is not brain surgery, is it? It's not. It's not. It's just a question of getting the right materials. So the way that I describe the making of this variety of rug, it does have a high pile. And if it doesn't have a high pile, because the rows are X amount of distance apart, right? Maybe like half an inch or a third of an inch. If the pile is too short, you will see between the rows. You see what I mean? So for that reason, you can't cut corners on rear rug backing and say, well, I'm going to make a rear rug with a high pile like a latch hook, but I'm going to do it on a rear rug backing, but I'm going to make it much shorter so I can get more detail. You're going to be sorry that you cut it too short, because the rug is going to look bald, right? Because you're going to be able to see in between all those lines. You always need to think about your materials when you're fooling around with something new. And this rug is intended to be a high pile rug. That's why the backing is woven the way that it is, to accommodate rows that are staggered at a specific distance apart, and that the height of the rug, it's already accounted for. The height of the rug, your strips will be about maybe 1.5 inches high. It would say it in the directions, right? It'll say it on the tutorial. They can be longer, but they can't be shorter because they have to hide the row behind them. And typically, the most rear rugs we see are between the 1950s and the 1970s, because, as I say, in the 1970s, latch hook overtook as a craft rear rug. Latch hook was a copy of rear rug, but it was done with much less expensive materials, and it was easy to commercialize because the price point was better. So latch hook took off, and big carpet makers and thread companies and suppliers, American Thread Company, all of the big magazines stocked latch hook kits and did not stock rear rug kits. Too expensive, not enough profit, not enough of a market for people who wanted to spend that much to make a rug, right? So as soon as we hit the 1970s, that's kind of the end of it, until Melinda's, I think, grandma brought it back. And then we see more now that Melinda's been teaching for maybe 10, 20 years, right? But they are beautiful rugs, and they are high pile. And if you see them somewhere, they're worth a hell of a lot more than a latch hook rug. The average rear rug is worth about $300. Like every other kind of rug, when we're talking about, this looks so much like a Paul Klee, when we're talking about a category of rug, in this case Rhea, every pattern has a name because only a small amount of companies produced these rugs as kits. And they would show you they would either kit it or show you the pattern, just like any other pattern, lace making, crochet, cross stitch, whatever, where you would have to change color. So they showed you how, like cross stitch, how many to go before you changed color, and that was the pattern, and that came with what you bought. So we know the names of the patterns, and some of them are quite rare. And when we are looking at that end of the rear rug, we're looking at rear rugs that are in the thousands, not in the hundreds. So when you see these, if they strike you, they can be very collectible. They can also be very matted, right? They can be like a matted wool, like sheep, right? They can look super gross. They can be super matted and super worn if they've been used a lot. The material, because of the high pile, could be beyond like refining and making beautiful and luxurious again. They could be like rat-a-tat-a-tooies, all messy and dirty looking. Yeah, and you see this too. And there's still, floor size ones are still going to be expensive, always more expensive than latch. But condition matters a lot if you are collecting these. So something to think about, and definitely go back to those videos if you're curious. Here's another question for you. What kind of rug is this? Now, this is a newish rug, right? This rug is maybe 20 years old as a form. You can see that it's sewn. You can see that it's sewn on a sewing machine. These are all clues. I bet that some of the quilters who are watching will know what kind of rug this is. So I'll pause for a second, and I'll give you some more clues because I know there's a delay. This kind of rug has been very, very popular in the last 20 years because there is a corresponding, nope, not a braided rug. That's a great guess. Nope, because this is sewn, and this is sewn on a sewing machine. It does look like a braided rug. This is made from cotton. There is a product that has become very popular among quilters, and it shares the name of this rug. And it's a packaged product that corded. Nope, that's a great guess too. That's a great guess. Nope. This is a jelly roll rug. It's something very specific that is all over the internet. Yes, great job, Diane. Jelly rolls, if you're not a quilter, jelly rolls look like, wait a minute, let me show you a jelly roll and then we'll look at the rugs again. Jelly rolls look like this, right? But they can come, yep, good job, Judy. These are like primary colors, solid Kona cotton or whatever, solid colors. You know, they do batik ones, they do Halloween ones, they do Easter, they do floral, they do small, you know, calico. They do anything that you can think of. You know, every brand also, like K Facet has jelly rolls in his prints, and Tilda and all of the big brands now for quilters. Um, you know, clothesline K I've heard, and I don't know what a clothesline is. So that's interesting that you say that because I forgot about that variety of rug. I'm going to have to look that up because I'm just not sure. The reason I know a jelly roll rug is because if you remember when I did my first book, I did lots of chapters on different forms of rug making, and this is one of the ones they wanted to shove down my throat. And they were adamant that I was going to put a jelly roll rug into the first book. And I didn't. I was just as adamant that I was not going to, because if I had, this would have been the only rug form in the book that required a piece of equipment that was not handheld. And to me, that it's not that I'm against using a sewing machine. I just thought not everybody has a sewing machine. Not everybody is apt at using the sewing machine. That's not fair, right? That's not what this book is about. We're talking about using tools with your hands, making rugs with your hands, not making rugs with machines. So I'd really dug in, and it was almost a deal breaker with that first book, but I did not do a jelly roll rug. I think they are fantastic, but the premise of these jelly roll rugs is you use the strips as they are, right? One jelly roll is never going to make one rug. I don't know what the proportions are because I didn't end up doing it, but it's a lot of quilt material to make this. And this is quilt material on the floor, so you need to think about that too. What your lifestyle is at home. Do you keep your shoes on? You come in from the snow and the mud and walk across this thing. They would be washable, right, if they're cotton, but then you want to be sure that they've been washed and they are coming as jelly rolls. I don't know. I don't know how any of that would work out. This is not a form that I would be interested in doing, but the idea is that you can use these pre-cut strips that make up a jelly roll, and they are color planned for you, right? If you like the jelly roll, you just pick up X amount depending on the size of the rug you want to make, and you make this on your sewing machine. And it does look like a braided rug. It's an exceptionally pretty rug, and if you are a barefoot house, you know, you can, and you can put cord in it. You can definitely put cord in it. There are tutorials online for, oh, I wonder if the clothesline rug is the corded rug. Is that what a clothesline rug is? That would make sense. You don't have to put cording into a jelly roll rug, right? You can just sew it flat. So it's entirely up to you how you want to do it. There's multiple ways of doing it. It's a very popular form because there's more quilters out there than there are obviously rug hookers or punchers. By far, there's like 250 quilters to every rug hooker. So it's way more quilters out there. So this is appealing to some of the quilters. It does look beautiful. It's a great form for like the kitchen table too, right? Really pretty. All right, let's move on to our next one here. And okay, that was our jelly rolls. So I was totally smitten when I saw this rug. Carol says, you wrap the fabric from the jelly roll around the rope and then use the machine to zigzag. So you're zigzagging over the clothesline or the rope. Ooh, that would give it some great height. Do you need a special machine? Like, do you need to have like an industrial kind of a machine or a heavyweight machine to go over the cording? Yes, use cotton clothesline as the inner core. Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. I have an industrial machine, so that would work. I wouldn't want to tempt it. I wouldn't want to tempt it because I use it all the time. But man, these industrial machines, even like I've got a Singer, it's not an expensive machine. That thing moves like a train. If you put your face under that, it would sew your face. Like it means business. Yeah, that machine was the machine that I'm on right now is maybe $250. It's not nothing, right? It's not nothing, but it's not like a luxury machine, right? I don't use those kinds of machines anymore because all I do is zigzag. Interesting. That's interesting. I love that. I love the word like clothesline rug. That is so cute. That has a lot of charm. My grandmother used to quilt. Oh, Veronica, did she? Yes, and no different machine. You would do it with your regular machine. All right. Well, that's good information too, because no one wants to buy a special machine to make a rug, right? That's just like that. Then it becomes a too expensive rug. Very good information, you all. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting, as always. I knew that there was a lot of quilters out there, and you are always so knowledgeable. I appreciate it. Now, we're back to rugs here. And as I say, I was completely smitten with this rug. For some reason, I could not get an image of this rug. There's a tiny lighthouse out on the left of it, but I could not manage to save the version of it. This is a Pinterest thing that I found. I thought this was such an extraordinarily pretty piece because while it's a folk art composition, oh, Carol says the rope is softer than regular clothesline. I see. It's more sort of mushy. So there's less. Because, you know, I'm just thinking of my past sewing machines and how if you ran over anything thick, like it didn't like it, even like a, you know, really pronounced seam, it would like jump, like it was like, like, you know, like it was dying and choking. I can just imagine it like, you know, skateboarding over a rope. My new machine, the heavyweight, would go just fine. But yeah, something softer would be better, right? Would be less trying on the tip of the needle, right? Because I suppose the needles could break and then you just replace them. But yeah, I think most people's machines are better than the ones I buy because I just go through them like toilet paper machines. And I don't have enough to lay out for a super expensive machine. These are great tips. Feel free, you know, for gallery night next Sunday, please, if anybody has made like clothesline rugs, regular jelly roll rugs, any other forms of rugs, or even quilts, please send photos of that in. We're interested in all of the stuff that we're making here. We're interested in the work of all of the buddies. Even if it's not a hooked rug, I would still love to see the things that you all are working on. And I would love to hear the tips, like we're hearing now about the rope versus the cording. I love to hear tips like this because there will be people watching tonight and there will be people watching over the next weekend and over the next months and years that say, oh, good idea, right? And it's helping someone. So please always feel free to send in different varieties and techniques, not just rug hooking. Sharon says, you can use clothesline on a regular sewing machine to make rope bowls. I have made plenty. Sharon, come on. Can you send a picture? Do you have any pictures that you could send for gallery night? I would love to look at those. That sounds, you know what that reminds me of is I used to make hats on a sewing machine for the BBC back in the days of theater costuming. Sewing straw. I mean, if it's straw that's like wide, no problem. If it's straw that is like a thread, whew, you know, especially getting that little center in the crown, that beginning, and going around and around on the sewing machine. Whoa. I'm guessing it's similar to that because with hats, we would have to, with straw hats, shape the crown on the sewing machine. Of course, the straw was very, I mean, you could sew right through it. It was very easy, and we always worked on industrial weight machines. Yeah, send some of those pictures in. That's really neat. Carol says, I did it on my Singer featherweight and jeans needles. Okay, I forgot about that you could change the needle because the jeans needle is more like a leather needle, isn't it? With a much sharper kind of shaped tip, right? Like more of a sculpted tip for more of a interesting. You're kind of making me want to make a clothesline rug. My eye just started twitching. Don't get me started. So with this picture, I think the thing that really struck me about it is that it is a folk art composition, but it is not folk art colors. It's not traditional folk art colors. It is a straight up home run of a naive rug, right? This is not a commercial pattern. And remember, right to the left on that little sort of jetty, there is a tiny little lighthouse out there. This is a beautiful picture of a cottage, a Cape Cod house with a garden. It is so charming, by the sea, little dirt path, all of those colors, a little bit of a God's eye view, right? It's an angled down view, but it's not a realistic view. That's what makes it look so folky. It is so charming. The little gate closed over the path, but very welcoming path leading you right into the door. Do you know anything about the architecture on Cape Cod houses? Do you know the style of house that's called the Cape Cod, right? It's a kind of a cottage. If you do, take a guess. Would you say that the house in this hooked rug it's a Cape Cod style house? Would you say that it is a full, a single, or a double? Do you happen to know? This is an architecture question. And it's not for everybody. I know this is a very specific and regional question. Just taking the opportunity to have another sip of water. Why am I so thirsty tonight? God, I'm like a fish tonight. I'm always struck because, of course, I love Cape Cod. We lived out on the Cape, and we are there often. Regular tip, a larger needle. Okay, interesting. I love seeing Cape Cod houses because they are distinctly different. 1.5 story Cape. Okay, so your guess is 1.5. Because I'm not going to focus on the stories. I'm just looking at like the front of the house. There is a distinction. Excellent, Kathy. There is a distinction when you look at these houses. The whole game is how many windows are on each side of the door, and are they on the same side of the door? This is a single, and it's a single. It's called a single because the door is in the middle, and there is a single window on each side. Now, is this useful to know? I don't know. Maybe do they still have like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You never know. This is the breakdown of what these houses look like. So the one on the left is a half cape. With a half cape, the door is always on one side and the windows are on the other. It's a smaller one. This would be for a bachelor, like someone who works, maybe not a sea captain because it's not a fancy house, but someone who works by the sea. It's a cottage that would be by the sea, but it would be a bachelor's house. This would not be a 2-person house. The one in the middle is a 1.5. There's one window on one side, 2 on the other, and the one on the right is a double. So we were looking at a single in the picture, in the rug. Here we're looking at a half, a 3/4. I'm sorry, it's not a 1.5, it's a 3/4, and a half, a 3/4, and a double. And it's like, who cares? But it is fun when you see this style of house. My eye always counts the windows. The half is easy. You rarely see the half. You rarely. I mean, I lived on the Cape for years. And I mean, I know of maybe 3 that I know where they are on the Cape, that when I see them, I go, oh, look at that little thing. That is so cute. It's much more common to see the 3/4 and the doubles and the singles, because people typically like symmetry. So you often get the doubles and the singles. But yeah, the 3/4 has the asymmetrical windows because it's not quite as big. If you think about building a home like with blueprints, what's the first thing you're going to think about? Well, how big do you want it? Like, do you want a room on both sides of the door? Like the basic floor plan stuff. These are all capes because of the style of house and the style of roof, but they are called different things because of the placement of the windows. I think this is always interesting to think about. Amzi says, hooking with Stash sisters in Dayton, Texas. Visited with Sonia Ao. Raves about you and her experience with Tigger. Oh, that sounds so great. Thank you for letting me know. Amzi, we always love seeing your work in at the magazine. And I think you had something in this past month. No exception. Always love seeing you, and say hello to everybody for us. Thank you so much for passing that on. So that was one little architecture question that got thrown at you. And you never know. When you're away this summer, you might see a Cape Cod style house and you might go, ooh, there's one window on one side, 2 on the others. What's that? It's a 3/4, right? Because it's not balanced. Or there might be a door and then only 1 or 2 windows on the other side. You know that's for the bachelor, and that's just a half. So it's fun. It's just fun to know what you're looking at, isn't it? Now, speaking of, what are we looking at here? I remember somebody wrote in the post, because this is our thumbnail for tonight too. Somebody wrote in the post, God, I didn't know that they made glasses for dogs. It does look like a dog, doesn't it? Like glasses on a dog. So funny. This is one of the most extraordinary rugs I think I've ever seen. This came up, I think on Pinterest. So no great information. No great attributions or anything with this. It's just you can't even click on it and get any further information, which is so frustrating. This certainly looks like a one-of-a-kind rug. Can't be sure, right? Because I don't know anything about it. Very unusual rug with a herding dog that appears to me to be a border collie. Colors are a little bit funky, but with that white muzzle, I think it's a border collie. And I don't think he's wearing glasses. I think it's just the coloring, right, of this particular dog and the choices that were there. But I think this is an extraordinary rug in terms of like color fill, hit or miss quality, outline choices, the shapes of trees. It's a super stylized rug that is done in a much earlier tradition. I would think that this is a maybe mid 20th century rug. It could be like a 1940s rug. Yeah, I would put it. I would put it somewhere in there. Could be later, right? It could be later, but if it's later, it's done in an earlier style. It's just extraordinary because we're not only seeing this a lot of movement and energy in the hit or miss fills, but we are seeing patterning. And usually those two things don't go together, right? There's been a deliberate choice here to fill in the ground with some patterning that looks like flowers all over the grass. I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's a very clever way, whether or not those trees are meant to be purple and red, whether or not this person ran out of green, we don't know. Let's say the person did run out of green. Isn't it clever to then do trees in other colors and make it look like you did that on purpose by including a little of all of those colors in the flowers and the grass? It unifies everything in such an artsy fartsy way that you look at it and you go, of course it was meant to be like that. You can see that that color is present throughout. I mean, it's just an extraordinary example I wouldn't say an early hooked rug. I don't think it's a 19th century rug, and I don't think it's a particularly early 20th century rug. I think it's a 1930s, 1940s rug. But my question for you here is a dog question for you dog lovers. I think this is actually a border collie in the rug. Before, people didn't always say border collie for this breed. Which of these names is what a border collie was called before the term border collie was agreed upon as the name for the breed officially? Is it a Scotch sheepdog? Is it an old-fashioned collie? Is it a working collie? What do you think? What do you think this dog would have been called before somebody somewhere said, no, it's a border collie and that's an end to it? It was not always called that. So interesting. But it was also a great opportunity to look at this rug with you because the movement of the sheep, right? One facing in, one facing out, one laying down, looking newly shorn. I mean, it's the colors are just amazing. And if you look in the top right-hand corner, you see there are some kind of primary colors, blues, reds, traditional cut up my clothing colors, right? So it does have the feel of a rug where somebody ran out of material. Melanie says working collie. Yeah. So it does make me think that it is a rug that does have a lot of hit or miss, that it was a necessity because people ran out of the colors. So we've got 2 votes for working collie. I have to apologize to you. This was another trick of a question. All 3 of them were correct. So this was the problem with this breed of dog, was that everyone was calling them something different. Some people called it a Scotch sheepdog. Some people called it an old-fashioned collie. Other people called it a working collie. And there was a lot of confusion of language, so it had to be decided. One thing had to be settled on. And there was one other thing that I forget what it was, but it was something else like that, like another something sheepdog, or there was 4 distinct names for this breed. So once it was decided that this dog would be called a border collie, then all of those others became kind of antiquated and people don't really say them anymore. Looks like a rough coat collie. Could be. It could be. I don't know my collies that well. I just looked at the muzzle and I thought, maybe that's a border collie. I don't know what a rough coat collie looks like. I mean, I can picture the coat. But yeah, the question is basically a vehicle because I wanted to look at this rug together. It's such an exceptional rug, and I had never seen it before. Now, here comes another exceptional rug. We are at the end. I'm sorry we're running over. I thought that was impossible. Here's another exceptional rug that I do believe this is a late 19th century, early 20th century rug. A huge hit or miss component on this rug. I don't know if this is like a state or what, or if it's just a cutout and this is how much blue there was to be had. this is such an unusual rug. I don't know enough about birds either to say this is the nutting hatch doodle bird or whatever. But I do recognize this little character. And so my question for this slide is going to be, what kind of character is this? This is something specific, right? If you can remember, or if you've ever seen picture books from the very early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century, is this a brownie, a fairy, or an imp? I think the answer is conclusive, and I will tell you the answer in just a second. But I had not, this is another rug I found while I was researching for this show, and I was trying to find some different things to show you and give us some interesting stuff to talk about. And I stumbled upon this and I thought, man, you must be joking. It's not that it's good, right? It's not that in my mind it's good, but it, like anything of the Victorian period, it does have that sort of scrapbook quality. It's like, okay, this is my blue. There it is. I got blue, I got dark blue, I got light blue. That's as much as I got. Filling in colors, right? Okay, I've got enough to do 4 flowers. Let's do flowers in the corner. Got to have the flowers, right, in this piece. And putting in a couple characters that are classic characters. Amzi guesses elf, that are classic characters from this time period. A bird. You always need a Victorian bird, right? You can't go without flowers and a bird. This little character is really specific. So this, we have 1 vote for elf, 1 vote for imp. I think it is a brownie. And the reason I think it's a brownie is because of what it's wearing on its head, right? It's not a little leaf, it's like a little cap. The character, brownie was a specific, it was not like a sort of mythological character. It's not like an Irish folkloric character. A brownie is a character brownies appeared in comic strips and books, right? And brownies were created by a guy called Palmer Cox, C-O-X, who was born in 1840 and died in 1924. He was a Canadian illustrator and author, and he created a series of books, Elf on the Shelf, a series of books about brownies. And brownies are like little sprites, little elves, right? They're little tiny guys, but they were a little bit mischievous, but mostly more confused than mischievous. Very sweet, very dated series of books. But brownies in the early 20th century were super, super, super well known in the late Victorian period. This character, the brownie, became so popular in comic strips and in children's books and in illustration in general, that anything small people started to refer to as a brownie, like using brownie as an adjective. For example, an Eastman Kodak camera was produced in the early 20th century. Like it was one of the first handheld cameras. It was popular. It was a small enough one that it didn't need a stand. It was small, and it was called the brownie. And that was because brownies are small. And everybody at that time knew what brownies were. So it's interesting because with brownies, they can wear different hats, but you often get the hat that has that pinched top that stands up. In this picture, we're seeing brownies who are policemen and like a brownie mayor, but the male brownies tend to wear what is like a brownie uniform, and it has that weird little pinched cap. Now, it doesn't mean that you never see an elf or an imp or a fairy wearing a similar cap. Of course you can. There's lots of illustrations from the same period with fairies and imps wearing leaves for hats, and they are quite similar. So I can't be sure, but it is a look that is really I mean, it was you can't overstate how popular this is Palmer Cox, how popular these brownies were at that time. I mean, children it was like the Smurfs, but way more popular than that, you know. This was him. So Canadian illustrator and author. There are books about his work. They are very, very, very busy. It's almost like the Where's Waldos of the day. It's really interesting. Very hard to translate to rug hooking. In fact, I thought about doing a chapter because it's all public domain right now, right? He died in 1924, so all of his work is in the public domain. Um, so I did think about doing a chapter on brownies in the Design Like book, and then I decided not to because I just felt like to get those tiny now, if I had seen that rug that we were looking at with all of the hit or miss, I would have thought again. But the brownie illustrations are very, very busy, and I thought, who is ever going to want to hook something this complicated? One brownie would work great, and it does work great in the example of the rug that we just saw. Now I'm going to, Judy says, little short jackets and gangly legs along with the peaked cap. Yep, exactly. Exactly. That is, let's look one more time. That is the look. They do almost have a uniform. They're always like doing, there's always policemen and like public figures. There's often like scenes with mayors and stuff. This looks like they're dancing in this one. I don't know what's going on in the foreground. People are being whisked away, maybe also dancing. Hard to tell. They are often shown with birds, and then that really gives you a feel for how small they are because they can ride like two of them on the back of a bird. So just giving you an idea of how small they would be. Catherine says Cleveland Browns, American football team's mascot. Cleveland Browns. Oh, is it a brownie? Oh my gosh. That's interesting. Palmer Cox was from, I think, Toronto. We don't hear enough about Canadian illustrators, and it's a great opportunity to talk about one when we talk about brownies. So listen, I'm going to be on for one more minute. I just said at the beginning of the show I want to share. I found some cute stuff while we were away. I wasn't with you last week because the kids were on vacation. So I'm going to show you some photographs of the trip. More personal stuff with a few rugs in them. So if you're done and you've had your fill and it's getting late, you know I love you and I'll see you soon. But I'll just put a few more pictures on the screen because I want to show you a few of the things that we got up to that were very fun and a few of the rugs that I found. So we're going to move to that now. Let me show you. We got up to some good stuff. We drove up to New Hampshire. And one of the things, we drove up to Wolfboro, and that's where my older sister lives, in Wolfboro. We don't have icicles like this in Connecticut. My kids were so blown away with, not every year can be a good icicle year. And you can imagine what happened next right here, right? They almost broke the window of the store because they were like dueling, like sword fighting with the icicles. That's a given, right? Yeah, and my sister said, not every year is a great icicle year. It has to be like things thaw a little bit and they start to drip and then they freeze again and then they thaw and freeze. And you have to get it right. But man, I have never seen icicles like these icicles. I've also never seen, and we saw this was Valentine's Day, heart-shaped pizzas. Have you seen these yet? I saw 2 different places that served heart-shaped pizzas. I thought, come on, this is so cute. If you make stuff at home for your little ones or your loved ones, or they come to visit, make them a heart-shaped pizza. This was like the hit of the night. We got so excited when we saw this thing. It was like we lost our minds over that piece of bread. This was in an antique store, and I passed on this, and you can probably guess why. It was in sort of a lower-end multi-dealer shop. This is a beautiful hooked rug. I absolutely love the colors in this, but there's a giant hole, and there were a lot of other small holes. But you see the giant hole kind of down at the bottom on this photo, right in the center of a flower. A beautiful rug, easy to fix, right? I mean, this is the gaping hole. The other one's much easier to fix. You would just put fabric behind it, right? Attach it and hook right through it. Go for the same colors. It's not a tough fix. The border of this rug is remarkably good considering how big that hole is, right? So something chomped a hole through the middle. Maybe it was a leg of a table or something like that. Doesn't matter, right? It would be easy to fix. But the other thing about this rug was that it was so dirty because it was down on the floor. There's been snow on the ground forever. It's way dirtier than it looks. It looks kind of white in this photo, but it was so manky. Like I wouldn't have wanted to handle it. Isn't that awful? Because I loved it. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I thought, what a great, collection of colors here. It's a very colorful rug. It's super charming. If it was a few years ago, I probably would have bought it just because I bought everything. I probably would have bought these too. I walked around the corner of this antique store and I saw this collection of little, both toy and miniature working sewing machines. And I got to say, I almost lost it because I have been thinking in the back of my mind, oh, I would really love to start a collection of toy sewing machines. And it wasn't just this row. It wrapped around the whole stall. There was three more shelving units with just as many. And they weren't that expensive. They were like $35 each. That's very, very good. But I don't have any yet, and I hadn't started my collection. And I have to say, when I saw this many miniature and toy sewing machines, it made me not want to collect, because if I was going to collect, obviously I would have to buy them all, like right here and now, and I just couldn't. I just didn't have the money, and I just couldn't. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna pass on that. I'm gonna focus on my other stuff that I love to collect and I love to find. But it was wonderful to see so many. If you're a sewer, you know you love to see like sewing collectibles. And these mini, some are mini and some are toy. And they're all different brands, and some of the toy ones had decals, and they were all interesting. And oh, it was such a lot of fun to find that. And here's Joss skiing. That's one of the reasons we went up there. You know, we used to call, she did so well. She did so, of course she fell a bunch of times. You know, they don't give them the poles when they're learning, which I didn't know. I mean, I can't imagine skiing without poles in my hand. I just can't imagine. But they don't call this snow plowing anymore. They call it pizza. They call when you've got your skis tipped in like this. We used to call this snowplow to slow yourself down. You know, we used to call the snowplow. They call this pizza, and they call when your skis are when you're not slowing down and their skis are parallel. They call them French fries. So people are just shouting French fries and pizza to her, and she's doing the right thing with her legs, and she did great. But I just thought, again, things change so fast, don't they? I'm like, why are you shouting pizza and French fries? And then I was like, oh, okay. Another pretty rug that I found, I passed on this one too. You can see there's a lot of color loss in this one, particularly with the yellow flowers around the edges. Another pretty rug, the really striking feature on this rug, I think, are the spirals on the corners. We do see scroll work and spirals all the time on rugs, but this is really almost like Celtic knotwork. It's so pronounced. It's so different and unusual. For me, I passed on this because I've got enough. It was down on the ground. It was extraordinarily dirty, like the other one we saw. There was a lot of color loss, and it had a lot of loss around the edges. So this has been well-loved, beautiful rug. I thought it was a very fetching design. I thought it was interesting. It had a lot of geometry to it, very sort of Art Nouveau feel to it. The colors are beautiful in the center. It just, for me, I didn't even check how much it was. I'm sure it wasn't much at all. None of the rugs that I saw I don't think I saw any rugs that were more than $35, but they're not in good shape, right? So that's something else that you have to consider. I think this one was 35, something like that. Very cheerful flower pot. I mean, hey, I didn't get any of these. Again, I didn't need any of these. This is upside down. I should have flipped it right side up. They had it upside down on the floor. But because it's been upside down on the dirty floor, the other side the other side's always dirtier, but it's much dirtier. So I think they were presenting it like this because it looked a lot brighter and cleaner, but this is the wrong side, as we know. We're looking at the back of it. But in terms of design and color, I thought this is so cheerful. This is a good 1930s, 1940s rug, that era of forced cheerfulness and the colors that we used, and primary colors, bright colors, cheery stuff. And, you can never underestimate a cheerful flower pot. It really puts a smile on your face. It's a beautiful rug. The pot is very interesting. It's a beautiful symmetrical shape with great lamb's tongues, very controlled, beautiful color palette. It's an adorable rug. It was just another thing that I didn't need. Now get ready, because I do regret this. This was one of the places we stopped on the way home, and I do regret. I saw this stall. This was like the last aisle of this big multi-dealer shop, and I saw this stall, and I thought, these are the first rugs that I've seen. I was running through the whole big place, and I thought, why am I not seeing any rugs? And then right at the very end of the last aisle, I saw these two rugs, and I thought, well, these are such commercial patterns. I don't think I'm interested. I feel like they were maybe 85, something like that each, I think. I don't think they were more than that anyway. And I went for the one at the bottom initially. I was checking it out because I do love, I love gray and maroon together. Those are my Catholic school colors. So I love gray and maroon. That combo always strikes me as, I'm very attracted to it because of those great nostalgic days. But, I didn't get either. I thought, I don't need a commercial pattern rug. I have nothing to do with it, nowhere to put it. But when I came home and I was putting the slides into the show for you for tonight, I looked at the one on the top and I went, damn it, why didn't I get that one? It didn't even interest me while I was there. It's so beautiful with that striking black background, the purple roses. Why didn't I get it? What is wrong with me? I'm so sad that I didn't get it. I'm tempted to drive up and get it. It'd be a long ride, right? It'd be a long, stupid ride. But yeah, I was so upset with myself. Maybe next time we go visit my sister, I'll try to find it again, see if it's still there. I didn't like how it was folded, and I didn't like how it was folded on the ladder because it didn't fit and it was getting like crumpled, and that triggered me. So stuff that's that small is enough to kind of trigger me. I'm like, they're not taking care of this, but I shouldn't let that stop me. That's all the more reason to buy it. Anyway, I thought these were both beautiful. I loved them both, but I felt like I needed neither. And now I really feel like I need the one on the top. So it's like, watch this space. If I drive by that store again, I'm going to buy that rug. It reminds me of like a Claire Murray with the black background, right? It reminds me of more of a 1980s rug, and it might well be. I don't think I would say it's 1960s to 1980s. It's definitely a commercial pattern, but it's an unusual color plan. I just thought it was really striking, particularly working on the rose book right now, all of the beautiful roses on it, you know. I should have had a V8. I don't know what's wrong with me. I make one bad decision after another. It was such a lot of fun to be together tonight. I missed being together last week, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here for you running the shows and spending time together because it means a lot to me. With the kids being off school, it just became a busy travel week, and we did get snowed in when we were in New Hampshire. We got snowed into the hotel like Shining, like the Shining style. We couldn't go anywhere one of the days. We were at my sister's for one day, and then I had to leave a day early to go south because we were already checking into a hotel to meet friends, but I had to go an extra day because there was a total whiteout, two ice storm, 24-hour period where no restaurants were open. Luckily, there was a grocery store that was walking distance, and we got like food to heat up in the microwave at the hotel. And we kind of hung out downstairs. It was the night of the Saturday Night Live, so we watched that together, the 50th anniversary. But I've never been like snowed in, and it was in the center of Laconia. So it was a busy area, but nothing open. The streets were it was like a like sci-fi landscape, you know, so snowy and crazy, and very unreliable everything that day. But a lot of fun. But I did miss being on last week, so it's great to be back together tonight. Thank you. I had a wonderful time too. Yep, I loved putting it together, something different for us. Now remember, next Friday I have my birthday. Jocelyn has her Someone Special dance, and Teddy has his choir, his singing chorus thing at the Quinnipiac basketball game. So it is a triple whammy next Friday night. I won't be with you next Friday night, but I will be with you next Sunday night. And we will have our favorite night of the month, gallery night. So please be sending in your rugs, your quilted bowls, all of the interesting things that we just talked about. Tell me the things that you're working on, the things that you're considering, your materials, your color plans, whatever's going around in your head. Send me pictures of it. Let's talk it through together. Let's look at what you're working on or what you've been working on. Send all that stuff to Ribbon Candy Hooking at, oh, hey, Natasha. Thank you. Oh, is it your birthday too? Is it the same day? Is yours 28 as well? Or just next week? Oh, sure thing. It's great being with you all. It was great being with you tonight. I will be with you on Monday, so I'll put together a show for Monday. And we'll have to do that fast. Yeah, I'll be with you Monday and Sunday. And if there's an opportunity to do an extra show in there, I will. But we'll definitely be together on those days. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. You're the 26th. We are very close. Are you still Pisces? Is 26 still Pisces? I changed the GPS voice in my car to be a Pisces, and she says things like, the spirit really moves me to pull off this exit. Let's take this exit. Everything she says, it really sounds like me. It sounds like a crazy Pisces. It's a lot of fun. All right, everybody have a great weekend. It was great being with you all, and I will be back with you on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for coffee time. Until then, you can reach me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com, and go ahead and start sending me that stuff so I can start putting the show together and it's not all bottlenecked at the end of the week. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Kathy. I'll see you all soon.